said.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to make sure my mic is on, and I also want to remind those in the audience that prior to the agenda item being introduced, you have to get in your request to speak, so that goes for both the non-agenda items under number 5 as well as any of the other topics for action. All right. With that, then, I will introduce the first one of recognition. We have 3 recognitions tonight, and Sandy Kovac, would you introduce our first one?
Yes, I will. We're very pleased to have Amira Tobasi with us, and I'll have Tamira come forward. Amira has recently been recognized by the United States Achievement Academy as a student of excellence in honor roll. Amira will be a junior at Hudson High School this fall. To receive this honor, you must be recommended, and Amira was recommended by our high school biology teacher, Amy Petermeyer. And some of the standards that are included in the selection are academic performance, interest and aptitude, leadership qualities, responsibility, enthusiasm, motivation to learn and improve attitude. Let's do that again. Motivation to learn and improve attitude and cooperative spirit and dependability. It's quite a list, isn't it?
Yep.
So we want to congratulate Amira, and I asked her to just say a few words of what she's involved in that they kind of line up with those standards.
Okay, I am in gymnastics, track, and tennis, and I just got into the National Honor Society. I'm in Students Against Destructive Decisions and Youth Action Hudson. So, yes.
So you're not busy at all, right?
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. We're very proud of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, I understand we have a presentation with Knights of Columbus. Tony, you want to introduce that?
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. I'm very pleased to introduce John Knutson representing the Knights of Columbus tonight. John, come on up. John's going to be presenting the district with a gift from the Knights of Columbus, and this gift has been given for the last several years, and it directly benefits students with cognitive disabilities for activities that aren't otherwise supported by our school funds. And while some of the funds have been used to purchase classroom supplies and learning resources, one of the things I'm most appreciative for is that the funds have been used to support community-based instructional opportunities for our students, so they're able to practice the things that they're learning in the classroom out in the real world, working on their social skills, functional reading, and functional math skills. So in the past 2 years, the funds have supported approximately 40 students going out to restaurants, to the Ordway Theater, on fishing trips, to the Shrine Circus, and to the Children's Museum. So wonderful opportunities for our students. John?
Sure. Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here representing Council 1762 of the Knights of Columbus. We're a Catholic gentlemen's organization that's a service club, and we raise money through a annual fund drive. We raise approximately $6,000, and the Hudson School District is one of 4 recipients. The other 3 are Bridge for Hudson Youth, Special Olympics, and St. Croix Therapy. So all of our contributions are to people with physical and intellectual disabilities. So I'm happy to present a check to the school district for almost $1,000 on behalf of the Knights of Columbus.
And Tony, you have the next agenda items. Why don't you introduce that?
Sure. I'm also pleased to introduce staff from EP Rock School, Principal Amy Hamburg, Aaron Schiltgen, Kelly Curtis, Steve Schonecker, and Charlotte Kempford. Please come on up. I didn't miss anyone, did I?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you.
So these folks are here representing Rock, as I said, because recently they were recognized as a School of Merit for their work implementing positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS, and that's something that the board is heard about quite a bit in the last few years. PBIS is a proactive approach that establishes safer and more effective schools. Schools were recognized as schools of merit based on a pretty rigorous application process, and EP Rock will be receiving a banner and recognition at the annual PBIS conference that Kelly and I will be attending, and maybe some other ones, or anyone else attending, and Steve as well, next week down in the Wisconsin Dells. So this is very exciting. Congratulations. And just looking at the application and the recognition from the state, there's obviously a big focus on universal prevention through consistent and clear expectations, teaching and reteaching of skills, and then recognition of good student behavior. Can you tell us how you've brought those things to life at EP Rock, Amy?
Sure. So first of all, we have a team here because it is a team. It's every staff member. We meet regularly, and we have playground person on our committee, as well as a teacher from every grade level. And we have a parent who comes in monthly and meets with us, as well as cafeteria and noon duty outside. So our goal is to provide a safe and inclusive environment. So we teach and reteach a lot. So we teach the expectations using videos, using practicing. We have a passport system. Steve developed actually an app that we use for our students to be reminded of what they need to be doing. So we're positively teaching the expectations all the time at EP Rock.
So a lot of great things that are happening there, and just reviewing your application, I see that that's translated into some great outcomes for students. Can you just highlight one or two pieces of data that really stand out?
Sure, and data is how we make our decisions about what should be taught and retaught, and so one of the goals in creating a safe environment is students are taught and retaught things, and we measure those using our data, and the team decides where we need to focus our next amount of work, or if it's outside, students need to be taught the playground rules again. We do that. So one of the things that we look at is how many students are getting office referrals. So if they get an office referral, they've not remembered what the rule was or the expectation. And so we've seen not only a decrease in the number of students who only need to be taught the rules once. We measure how many times are repeat office visitors and need to be retaught over and over. So that number has been going down consistently from the last 3 years, but also the end goal of fewer special education referrals, and we've seen that number decrease for the last 3 years over time. So that's been one of our accomplishments. We're not trying to put anybody out of work, Aaron, but that's wonderful. So,
Thank you, and thank you for your wonderful efforts, your whole school team.
all right, thank you.
Thank you all. I guess, just to summarize, I mean, speaking for the board and on behalf of the board, I just congratulate Amira with the great job that she did. Way to go. And always appreciative of partnerships that we have with the community, and in this case, the Knights of Columbus. And that is a very worthy cause that they're supporting here, and you know, we appreciate the efforts that teaming up with our district. I didn't want to preclude any of the other board members from commenting on any of the recognitions. Did anyone else have anything to add? All right. So with that, I guess we turn over to the superintendent's report.
Ooh. Thank you, Mr. President. And good evening to everyone. Preparation is in full swing in the Hudson School District for the coming school year, and I would be remiss if I did not recognize our facility and ground staff who have been working diligently throughout the summer and will continue to work right up until the school year and beyond, getting our schools ready for our staff to come back. And one of the large projects that's going on throughout the district is around safety and security. And you'll see as our schools open in the fall that we will have locked and secure entrances at each of those buildings, thanks to those individuals who have worked so diligently this summer. Certainly want to thank Jim Staskell for his leadership and Tim Erickson as well. So with that, we also have our clerical staff at our schools and in the district office working very diligently as well. And we have registration that has occurred throughout the district. This week, we'll have our first set of new teachers coming in. Those are new special education teachers who will be coming for training. And then next week, we start the Summer Academy, where many of our Hudson educators are helping share their talents and experiences with their colleagues during the Summer Academy time. There's a SMART retreat that's going on for all of our schools, and Dave Gramble will be leading that. And then on Wednesday, August 20th, we start with all of our new certified staff coming in and all of our probationary staff in the next couple days. On Tuesday, August 26th is the kickoff with all of our certified staff being back in our schools. Certainly that's a big event, and we start off with a welcome back breakfast and then a program, and our theme this year is HSD, Connecting Passion and Purpose for Learning. Certainly a worthy theme as we look forward to a coming school year. And then we have many, many things going on in the district and the schools as we prepare for that first day of school. Schools will have open houses and meet the teacher nights. And then on September 2nd is the first day of the 2014-15 school year, and it's coming fast. And I know most of us who are working might wish that there are a few extra weeks because it is coming very quickly. But a lot of good work is going on in August. Unless there's any questions, that would be the end of my report.
Any questions then? All right. Thank you, Mary. Sounds like a lot going on and a short time to prepare, I guess. All right, so now we move on to our report section with Sandy Kovac and the first report on preliminary advanced placement results.
Thank you. I'm very pleased this evening to share with you the preliminary spring 2014 AP results. The Hudson School District continues to see an increase in the number of students taking advanced placement courses, which of course indicates a desire by our students to challenge themselves with college-level coursework and expectations. The advanced placement program enables students to pursue college-level studies while still in high school. And just a point of knowing that the AP program is a global academic program. It's currently offered in secondary schools in over 100 countries around the world. So in essence, our students are preparing themselves to perhaps compete in any college or university across the world. Hudson High School currently offers 13 AP courses plus 9 online AP courses, and one other clarification here as well. One of those, the AP Biology of the 13, one of those 13, we have yet to be able to offer inside our schools due to our shortage and adequate lab science space currently at the high school. This year we had 447 students take 793 tests in May 2014. So if we look at that data a little bit closely, from 2013 to 2014 then we had an increase of 20 students for the number of students taking AP, a slight increase then in the number of exams, just a slight, probably not significant at all, decrease in the number of scores 3 or above, and then we stayed just about the same in the percent of those exams at 3 or higher. And again, scores of 3, 4, or 5 tend to be what our colleges and universities are looking for to earn credit at the college level. So here we break it down and look just a little closer. We're looking at the total AP students going back in time. So you can see from 2008, only 209 students up to 447 in 2014. And just again, a little further information. I'm looking forward to actually next year's report because you might recall that one of the courses you approved this year was AP Human Geography, which is a 10th grade course this year. For both Mrs. Shoemaker and myself, it was more than a pleasant surprise. We were sitting there kind of preparing for maybe 2 sections. We have about 190 students registered,
Wow.
7 sections. So that number will be skyrocketing next year. A number of exams, again, if you look back, 2008, 2009, about 300, and we're up to total number of exams at 793. And then scores stayed about constant from last year, 631 in 2013 to 628 in 2014. And then our scores compared with Wisconsin and then globally, which again is any of the countries that are offering AP, and our overall percentage of AP students with 1 or more scores of 3 is 78.5. So we're very pleased and excited for future expansion. I must say that when I talk to some of my colleagues, and I think Mary could echo that too, many of them right now are struggling to get kids into their AP courses. Variety of reasons, from worried about their GPA or just all the things they're involved in. And so they're just amazed at the fact that Hudson keeps seeing increases in the number of students in those courses. So we're doing it right. I wanted to also point out Principal Shoemaker, too, has plans so that she will be bringing together the teachers of AP so that they also have a collaborative opportunity. They often have that opportunity within their department, but that they'll be working with each other as AP teachers, looking at things like rigor, strategies for teaching, critical thinking, and other things that are needed for a successful AP course. So that's a nice addition.
Great.
Questions?
Any questions for Sandy? All right, Dave, you're up next, I think, with SMART goals.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And as you know, it's our annual tradition in August to share with you SMART goal results from the previous year, and we're excited to do that once again. Along with me, we have Principal Peg Shoemaker, Principal Susie Prather, and Principal Dolph Schmidt to share results. First, it's always fun to share these results, and the thing that we think about, our SMART goals are all focused on student learning, and yet, without exception, every year, it's remarkable how much adult learning we experience as a byproduct from this experience. So, and you'll hear a little bit about that tonight. In terms of lessons learned, tonight you'll learn about the shifts that have been made in the SMART goal process, the results of the 2013-14 SMART goal process, and the next steps we'll be taking as a district to ensure continued success. You'll see how our current SMART goal results, trend data over time over the past 5 years, and our current collaborative initiatives at all 3 levels are leading us to further refinement in our SMART goal process. The number one thing we know is that SMART goals work. They absolutely work to drive our achievement and move our student learning forward. We've also learned, and you'll hear about this tonight, that a uniform focus is something that the SMART goals can provide for us, and that leads to the improved results. And we've also learned that fewer, stronger, focused goals are much better than the many separate goals that aren't connected, and we've refined that process as we move forward. We've learned that stretch goals encourage excellence, so we set very lofty goals. And finally, you'll hear this over and over again, collaboration is absolutely the key to success in this process. You're going to hear a little bit about literacy tonight, and that will be an ongoing focus. Now, not all of our goals are directly linked to literacy initiatives, but as we learn about next steps, you're going to be hearing more about this, and you're going to be hearing about results in the area of literacy at all 3 levels. Oh, and before we go to that, sorry, a few more things. And as I said, not all of our goals are directly tied to literacy, but when we share our goals for the 2014-15 school year in October, you're going to hear much more about a unified focus on literacy. And again, you're going to learn about refinements that we've learned through the process of creating and developing the SMART goals. Another thing you're going to hear about is sometimes we miss the mark. We set lofty goals and sometimes we miss the mark, and we think that that is something to celebrate and learn from and grow from. And we very much appreciate the support that we've had in that direction from the board. With that, I'm going to pass it to our elementary principals to talk about their goals.
As Dave mentioned, some of our district SMART goals were focused on literacy, and this definitely was the case at the elementary level. 2 years ago, you may recall, we made the shift from reading to writing. And we had a long-term goal, a lofty goal of 80% of our students being grade level proficient writers based on more rigorous narrative writing standards. Even though this was our long-term goal, it was also our goal for the 14 school year. And if we move to our results, you'll see that we fell short of our goal, but 66% of our students met grade level proficiency. However, I do want to point out that the craft of writing really is a cumulative process, and students have had 2 years with this writing focus combined with more rigorous standards. So for a reference point, our kindergartners and first graders who have only participated in this type of learning have had a higher proficiency level this past year, 77%. And we're confident as these students grow through our system, they'll continue to increase their proficiency as they work through and move through the Hudson School District.
Dolph, can I ask you a question
Yes.
about that? Obviously, the goal was 80, and did you have some measurement before coming up with that 80%? Do you know where we were before?
We did. We had a baseline at the end of last year that was about 67%.
All right.
And so our end mark was about the same as last year, but Susie's going to talk about some of the learnings that we've had, that even though our data looks similar, there's some learnings that say that the writing was better. Our students were performing better. Our teachers knew more about what the standards really meant also. And so she's going to get into that, both the learning from the students' end and from the teacher end.
All right.
Thank you, Dolph. As an elementary division, all 6 elementary schools have learned a lot and have improved our practice of teaching and learning in the area of writing. We scored our students' writing collaboratively 3 times during the school year, both with our own building and across the district. The process is teachers read student writing out loud together, have a discussion, and look for evidence of the student using the specific criteria that we have set forth for them, and then they score it collaboratively. During this process, that has given our teachers higher expectations for our kids. Our writing has improved. When you look at a student's writing from last year to this year, our exemplars or examples of those high-level pieces of writing have really advanced because our teachers' knowledge of the expectations has grown and it is more rigorous. Another piece that has helped with that collaborative scoring is really the consistency of the same expectations across all 6 buildings, and that's something that we find very important. Another piece that we've learned is the student-friendly rubrics have really helped students to own their own writing. Students have an understanding of what's expected, and they're able to improve their writing through those student-friendly rubrics. For instance, in a kindergarten classroom, our students on a daily basis are self-reflecting on a few attributes of their writing, and they set goals of ways that they can improve the next time they write. In 3rd grade, some of our students, what they're doing is they're doing all of their writing on Google Docs, and using the criteria from the student-created rubrics, they're commenting and giving suggestions on how each other can improve their writing. And it's really powerful in the students understanding what's expected of that. And that feedback that's owned by the students is a really high impact strategy for students to improve their writing. So those expectations have risen both from the teacher standpoint and the students. Also, with our student learning objectives, those have all been aligned to our SMART goal. So our teachers are now making goals for their individual classroom, and they're not making attainment goals. What they're making is growth goals. So they're looking at where each student starts with their writing in the beginning of the year and looking and making goals based on that. And in those SLOs, we're seeing a lot of growth based on those high expectations from students' baseline to the end of the year piece with that. And that has led to a lot of focus both on instruction, teachers' action, and what we are focusing on with professional development. We also have seen an improved ability for teachers to teach the craft of writing. And our teachers, I'm so proud of how they've learned from each other, and collaboration, as David said, is one of the key points, because during our Day 6 collaborations, teachers discuss what are those expectations, what do they mean, they analyze student data, and they plan together how they can personalize instruction for those students. Some other pieces that help the teachers are our lab classrooms, where teachers are actually teaching the craft of writing. Other teachers are observing and giving feedback and talking about how we can improve how we are teaching writing with our students. Also, the instructional coaches have supported that process as well. So even though our scores may not show and depict the growth that we've seen, but when you look at our exemplars of our writing, we have seen a growth both in student learning and in adult learning.
Great. Thank you, Dolph. Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it. Dan Koch can't be with us tonight, so I'm going to share the information about the middle school SMART goal. And you can see the SMART goal was by spring of 2014, Hudson Middle School students will increase their disciplinary literacy skills, demonstrating growth nationally normed at the 90th percentile as measured by the NWA MAP assessment. We've been dealing with this goal for quite a few years, and it's a very lofty goal with very impressive results. It's also a confusing goal because we're talking about measuring growth. So what we're talking about there is actually looking at where a student begins and where they end at the end of the year and comparing that growth against all other students of the same age, same grade throughout the nation. And reaching the 90th percentile is a lofty goal. Reaching the 90th percentile year after year is even more impressive. The results are as follows. They reached the 97th percentile compared to the national norms. This is very impressive work, and they've learned a lot through the process. Having said that, one of the things that we've learned, it's time to move from the growth-based goal to an achievement-based goal at the middle school. Susie mentioned that the SLOs, or student learning objectives, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, are growth-based goals that all teachers write. We feel that we have a strong foundation in growth with the SLOs, and if we couple that with SMART goals that are based on achievement, we'll have the best measure for overall success for all of our students. A few other things that they've learned at the middle school. A reliance on multiple measures is important. When we put all our eggs in one measurement basket, that's not good for anyone because we don't learn as much about students, and by comparing results between assessments, we'll do much better. It's important, however, to note that we don't want to add additional assessments and continue to test more. Instead, when we assess, we want to assess smarter. So if we have assessments that we need to administer, we want to get everything we can out of those assessments. They've also, just as was shared at the elementary level, learned about the power of collaborative scoring. When teachers get together to score their student work, a lot of learning takes place. An interesting piece of information that was gleaned off these latest results is when they look at growth, the students in the Gifted and Talented program are growing at an increased rate, which is very positive and something to celebrate. But we did notice that students in reading intervention were not growing at the same rate. So that gives us something to focus on and look at as we move forward at the middle school. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Peg.
Good evening. The high school has been achieving this advanced placement goal and for quite some time. And it's definitely a measure of rigor and definitely a measure of really solid, good teaching year after year after year. So our goal was to maintain, in spite of having a lot more kids take the AP test and the breadth of the student range take the AP test. In spite of that, and take an AP course, we want to keep maintaining that 80%. We fell slightly short of that, and it's at a 79%, but really hanging right in there when you think that we did increase slightly the number of exams, but if you take a look at the number of AP courses overall, students enrolled in an AP course, it was nearly 5%. That's really something to be proud of as we keep maintaining that rate and yet ask students to take basically what we're saying is we want you to take a freshman college course. And so to really be able to maintain that, we want you to just have a go with this and see how it goes. To be able to do that is something to really be proud of. The other piece is the transcripted courses, which we saw a dramatic increase last year, and we've continued to enroll kids in transcripted courses where they can also receive post-secondary credit at a 12% increase. So lots to be proud of, lots of opportunity for our students in both of those. In addition, some key features that we've been looking at since the inception of advisories has been some of those key indicators, which include how many credits students are taking, if students feel comfortable, and if students, where's the, the discipline and positive behavior. So you can see what our percentages were at. In some cases we made it, other cases we didn't. And we can go to the results and see that the credit piece, 89%, was really not a problem at all. We dipped slightly in attendance, but nothing at all to worry about. Also the same with advisory. We had the dipped slightly to 83%. The advisory team planning team has been looking at those results and checking to see why might we have dipped, but we're right in the ballpark. And then you can see the freshman, sophomore, and junior school behavior measurement. You can see that as our kids are in our site, and this is, national data that would support this as well. As they're in your site, learn how you do school in that site. They become, independent, self-monitoring young adults. That's definitely what we want to see, is that they begin to do that. Probably our greatest challenge this year, and you've seen some of that at the school board level, has been the influx of social media and the impact that that's had on behavior. So we're doing a lot of proactive approaches, especially with our freshmen. We've got our seniors coming in, meeting with freshmen at the beginning of the year, talking about social media. And I've moved right into the results, so we might as well turn there. And that is the Power of Freshman Academy. We have had strong results in freshman teachers knowing they're freshmen. And I remember showing you at some point a picture of a net, and you think about a net in catching freshmen that are enrolling, catching them at their most difficult time in terms of developmentally and transitioning to a site with adults. And we also are looking at advisory in terms of grade level personalization. We'll look at, do we really need 3 days of advisory with seniors, or could we get them mentoring younger students? Some of those kinds of things. We'll continue to look at the AP courses, continue to look at how we continue to offer and have a really rich AP coursework, but get kids from all spectrums to, again, try out taking an advanced placement course, and what is it like to be a freshman, take a freshman course. And then we also, one of the other learning pieces is we've made a lot of strides, and you'll see in October when we present the goals about how we're moving to school-wide SMART goals, and that is a no small feat when you consider all of the different content that in the scope of a high school and how we're moving toward a school-wide goal. So exciting things at the high school.
Thank you, Peg. And real quickly, in terms of district learning, one thing that we definitely learned is that sustained focus over multiple years and using multiple measures is the key to embedded, sustained system improvement. And we'll be making some adjustments in the process to make sure that takes place. The other thing, and Peg just talked about the idea of these inclusive goals, and it is such a challenge at the high school when you think of all the different interests, all the different content areas, but we know that inclusive goal where all students and all teachers can feel a part of that progress is important. And finally, the idea of teacher leadership is so key in this, and we have strong, SMART teams at each building that provide a tremendous amount of leadership. Mary mentioned earlier that we'll be having our SMART retreat just right around the corner. We'll have about 80 teachers working on this idea of creating strong SMART goals and taking our learning into consideration. And another group that you've heard about a little bit, but you'll be hearing more from in October, is our instructional coaches, who play an increased role in the work of SMART goals because of some learning that we've experienced. So excited to share that with you in the upcoming months. We've looked at this SMART goal cycle before, and I won't read all the points, but I just want to point out one thing. We've learned something, and we needed to change something in that cycle, and that part that says new. When we reach that long-term goal, we need to take efforts to embed those, whatever we learned, and whatever we learned from an adult learning standpoint and a student learning standpoint, into the system and into our level of guarantees. We can't reach a goal and then set it aside. We need to embed it. And finally, a note on student learning objectives. We've heard about that a little bit, but student learning objectives, you've heard about these before, the SLOs. They're teacher-created goals that are part of the educator effectiveness system. They account for 50% of a total teacher's total evaluation, And the connection between the SLO and the SMART goal is critical. That ensures that everyone is rowing in the same direction. And we talked about some of these next steps. You're going to learn about the SMART Goal Tree in October, which is a mechanism that will help provide alignment. It's a graphic organizer that will organize our goals for us. We look forward to sharing that with you in October. The Smart Coach Academy was some professional learning that actually took place in Wausau. We're lucky enough to be hosting that academy in Hudson this year, which is an excellent opportunity. But we brought a team of instructional coaches to the Smart Coach Academy and increased their capacity for leading this process significantly. We also learned that we need to refocus on elementary literacy. And there's some data that suggested that making sure we're not moving too far away from our strong focus on reading is important. We'll be working on that. And the idea of disciplinary literacy as that unifying force that all teachers can work toward is another thing that we will be taking in the near future. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Tom, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, Mr. President, not a question, just a couple of observations. First of all, I'd just like to point out to the community that this is something that this district has been working on for the last 6+ years in terms of SMART goals. And so we're really well ahead of the curve in terms of other districts in the state who are just now really because of this because of this new initiative moving forward with measurements, we're well ahead of the game. So applaud to all of you and us for that. Secondly, another observation is that I really just want to continue to support and encourage you around these goals in that it's about growth, it's about reaching, it's not always about attaining. When you think about 88%, 90%, 94%, that's pushing the envelope pretty high. So I hope there's no discouragement about missing a goal, because really the measurement, and I've had some issues with this with other organizations, really the issue is how are we growing, how are we advancing, moving the ball forward, and that's happening. And so I just hope that you or your peers or the folks that work with you don't be discouraged about that at all. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else have any comments? Yes, thank you a lot for your presentation.
Thank you.
I guess I would echo Tom's sentiment about if we are always making 100% of our goals, maybe the question is, are we setting our goals high enough? So I think I like the notion of always stretching. So next is, I guess my name's on this along with Tony, and I'm going to turn over to Tony very shortly, but I just wanted to say that I attended the Hudson Community Foundation did a refocus, a 1-year anniversary visit to the forum that was so well attended initially about the effects of heroin and other drugs, amphetamines that are in the community, and the effect on the community. And Tony kind of kicked it off as a representative of the school district. He just did an outstanding job with the presentation, so much so that I went to Mary and to Tony and said, Tony's got to give this at an upcoming board meeting. So Tony, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And you're right, drugs have had a profound impact on our communities. All of you are probably aware we've had a number of very tragic deaths related to heroin and opiate overdose in our community. And because of this, I think drug prevention is more important than ever in our community, and the school district has been very, very involved in a collaborative prevention efforts. And some of those prevention efforts I was able to share at the Community Foundation event a few weeks ago, and I'm going to briefly provide you with an overview tonight. So our district's approach to drug prevention is very closely aligned with our other systems for academic and behavioral success for students. So that is, we commit a substantial amount of upfront energy that's dedicated to education and prevention for all students. And so some of these things are very, very specific to drug prevention, and others are more general in nature, like teaching decision-making skills and teaching other pro-social kinds of behaviors. These things serve as an inoculation, if you will, against drug use. So that's kind of the bulk of what we do, but we also have targeted interventions that support students that may be at risk for substance use, as well as more intensive or individualized interventions for students that are really grappling with addiction and substance abuse. Here you can see that we have a very large and diverse set of activities that are designed to proactively promote positive chemical health. And some of the items there have an asterisk next to them. Those are new initiatives just this past school year, and I want to just highlight two of them. First one being the Student Concerns Reporting Form. This is an electronic form that is live on our middle school and our high school websites at all times. It went up in about February, and this provides students, parents, and community members with another avenue for reporting concerns around student behavior. And we recognize that not everyone might feel comfortable going to an adult or going to a school official and sharing their concerns. And because of that, we wanted to provide them with another mechanism for reaching out. After all, if you see something, we want you to say something. That needs to be true for all of us, and we want to encourage everyone to report concerning behavior. The second initiative that I want to highlight here is the Know the Truth student and parent community presentations in the bottom right corner there. We had Know the Truth, which is an extension of Minnesota Teen Challenge Recovery Program, come and present to our high school and our middle school students during March. And they engaged our students in some very real dialogue and discussion about drug and alcohol use, and they also gave a community presentation one evening. In getting the reports from our students, it was very well received and it was very powerful and impactful. So we're looking forward to having Know the Truth back next school year. In terms of supporting students that might be at risk for substance abuse, we have targeted interventions, and the board has either heard presentations or has been directly involved with several of these activities. For example, our STRIVE program for at-risk students at the high school level. Moving on to more of our intensive individualized interventions, we have had several things in place, but you'll notice there that we have one with an asterisk, and that will be new for the 2014-15 school year. And this is going to be a collaborative effort with a community-based mental health organization who will come in and be able to deliver mental health therapy to our students in 3 schools. Now, given the relationship between mental illness and substance abuse, we think that this is going to be a very important intervention in our schools. The next several slides are going to provide some data about how these prevention efforts have been working for us. And there are certainly some positive things that you're going to note in the data, but I just want to say very directly that despite some of the good news in this data, we recognize that this is an area that we need to continue to focus on and continue to provide resources to the area of drug prevention. So we're very fortunate to have a dedicated full-time drug prevention specialist that coordinates many of our prevention activities. She's also very directly involved at the student level, especially at the high school. And you can see here that she had about 133 individual student meetings dealing with chemical issues just this past year. The next 4 slides are data that are taken from our Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is an anonymous survey that's given to students in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12 every 2 years. And given our specific concern around opiate use, I pulled the information that's most relevant to that topic. I would note here that there was one survey question that was directly about heroin use. And based on our data, I didn't include it here because the information was so very, very clear that almost none of our students are using heroin during their high school career. However, what we do know is that prescription pills tend to be a gateway to heroin use. And so I pulled that data. And here you'll see our middle school prescription drug use without a doctor's order. And you can see that from 2012 to 2014, we've had a pretty significant increase. And looking into that data, it's because our 6th grade students in 2012 actually reported 0% were using prescription drugs without a doctor's order, but in this last year, approximately 4% of 6th graders, so that's 11 and 12-year-olds, are now using prescription drugs without a doctor's order. That's very, very concerning for us and something that we need to look at. On a more positive note, though, you'll see here that at the middle school level, students that are reporting being given, offered, or purchasing illegal drugs on school property is down about 50% over the last 2 years, so that's great news. And then looking at that same data for high school age students, so again, surveyed in grades 10 and 12, use of prescription drugs without a doctor's order is down over 50% from 2012 to 2014, and it's also significantly below national and state averages. Similarly, high school students being given, offered, or purchasing illegal drugs on school property is down significantly and also well below state and national averages. We recognize that the survey data is really important, but doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. And that's because prevention needs to go well beyond just students' chemical use. It's also about our school creating a positive climate where our students feel safe, they feel positively connected with adults, they're engaged in school, and they have opportunities to pursue their interests through academics and extracurricular activities. And this is such an important thing. You saw it show up in the SMART goal that the high school had for last school year. And you can see here some perceptual data from our high school students. This is 2013 data, but an overwhelming majority of our students are feeling positively connected, and they're feeling that the school climate supports them making positive choices in their life. And just thinking about the data that Peg shared with us from this most recent school year, over 90% of students at all grade levels in the high school were found to be demonstrating appropriate behavior, and 86% were feeling that they were comfortable talking with an adult in the high school. So those are very, very powerful data points for us. We've also made some subtle changes to our disciplinary processes that we believe have made a positive impact on student alcohol and drug use. This is data related to our expulsion and pre-expulsion conferences, and you can see here that in 2013-14, we only had 9 of these cases, 9 pre-expulsion conferences that were related to alcohol and drugs. This is a 20-year low for our school district. And that's happening at the exact same time that we were increasing security, increasing supervision, and increasing police officer presence in our schools. So it's not as if we had turned a blind eye to alcohol and drug use. We really believe that it is going down in our schools. So then what are our next steps as we move forward? First and foremost, we want to continue to work collaboratively with all community stakeholders, and at the school level, we want to be implementing evidence-based practices that are designed to reduce drug use in all of our students. So with that, I would open it up to any questions and comments that the board might have.
Brad?
I just really appreciate the report and the level of detail and the focus on this. So thanks for the leadership there.
Thank you, Brian.
Anyone else? I guess I want to reiterate that, and thank you, Tony, for all your work over this last year in working with those other stakeholders that came forward with the Hudson Community Foundation's focus on this. This is truly a community issue. It's not just a school issue, but we're not, saying that this is only families' issues. This is something that the school is trying to do something about, and some of those survey results, we've got that concern about, certainly about sixth graders. I like the strides that we're making, and we saw that as a board when we saw fewer expulsion hearings and, the great intervention that's being done. So thank you for your work on that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. With that, we have one more report, and Dave Grambo, you have your name next to, and this is going to be talking about indicators of area growth.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Just earlier in the SMART goal conversation, we talked about multiple measures and how important it is to consider multiple measures when making decisions. And tonight we're going to be talking about multiple measures or multiple data points that help us understand the demographic shifts in our community. There is no one perfect data point when you're trying to measure growth in our district. So tonight I'll share several data points which will help us more fully understand growth trends in the district. So the first data point that I draw your attention to is information from the Wisconsin Department of Administration. And this comes from a report titled Wisconsin's Future Population Projections for the State, its Counties, and Municipalities from 2010 to 2040. and this was from December of 2013. And based on this 30-year projection, it projects St. Croix County's population growing at a rate of 41.1%. So that's between 2010 again and 2040, with a projected population at 119,010 citizens. Out of the DOA's top 15 fastest growing communities, the city of Hudson ranked number 12 with a projected population gain of 7,593 by 2040. The graphic below shows the counties of the state of Wisconsin, and they're color-coded by the projected growth. You can see as the colors get darker, the projected growth increases. That darkest category is for counties with projected growth between 15 and 41%, and you can see that there are several counties that fit into that category. And then you can take a look at St. Croix County as the highest with projected growth of over 41%, as I mentioned earlier. Another very interesting data point is down below. It's the Wisconsin Department of Health Services provides this data. And when we look at this data, what we're looking at is the population comparisons from 2006 to 2012. We're comparing the total population on the far right with the population between the ages of 0 and 14, which would most closely match our school-age students. You can see the increase from males and females between the ages of 0 and 14 from 2006 at 17,146 to 2012 at 19,169, and then total population from 79,469 to 85,111. It's important to note that this is St. Croix County, and that's not, we are definitely not the only school district in the county. So it's important to break these things out and look at them from multiple perspectives. But interestingly, if you compare those results, the total population increases by 7.1%, while the population of youth from 0 to 14 increases at a rate at 11.8%, showing us that that school-age population is actually outpacing the total population by a significant margin. You can see a quote there about the city of Hudson being the largest population center, and the fact that between 2010 and 2013, it grew 3.7% and projected to continue to grow. The next bit of data also comes from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, and what we're doing here is we're looking at birth rates. And you will notice as the table breaks out the birth rates by several different organizations. So we see St. Croix County as a whole. Again, keep in mind that that doesn't represent just the Hudson School District. And then the municipalities that represent the Hudson School District, again, not exclusively. So we have to look at this data again from multiple perspectives. But you can see there is a general trend down in the birth rates in the municipalities and in St. Croix County, which is an interesting data point and how that fits in with the others. Again, you have to look at it from several angles. You can also see that the Hudson Hospital birth rates increase significantly, knowing that not all of the births at Hudson Hospital end up being Hudson resident students. If we take a look at that quote down below, we can see again that through this study, not only are we growing due to migration of people into our community, we're going through natural birth rate increase as well. Even though it's slightly decreasing, the overall growth in the community can be felt. You can see that Wisconsin is projected to grow at a rate of 24.1% between 2000 and 2035. 33 counties are projected to grow more rapidly than that, with St. Croix County leading the way with a projected growth rate of 134%, and that is significant. I think there's a data point that's not up here, and it's the eyeball test. You can drive around the community, you can see a lot of growth, you can see that it is occurring. Here's an interesting breakdown as well. If we take a look at the individual municipalities in the county and look at their growth trends over time, as we look across at each one, City of Hudson, Town of Hudson, Village of North Hudson, Town of St. Joe, and Town of Troy, you can see some significant increases. You can see that that rate of from 63.8% growth to, and then the lowest being 14.25. That's still significant growth. It's quite a range there. Now this is the next data point is the one that I find most interesting. This is when we look at cohorts of students. So that is tracking a group of students from the time they enter our school system to the time they graduate. If we take a look at that table starting in 1994-95, kindergarten enrollment was at 248 students. When they graduated in 2007, that group of students grew to 397 students, an increase of 60%. And you can see those growth increases. You can see most recently, we have our 2014 graduates. They started kindergarten in 2001-2002 school year. They started at 296 students. We graduated 408 for an increase of 37.8%. That's an average growth of over 50% across that time frame. So you can see that when we talk about the number of students, we not only have the natural growth that affects our population, but we also have several students and several families that are moving into the community, and quite honestly, one of the reasons they move to the community is because of the school system. So we see those changes in population. And finally, if we take a look at another interesting data point, it says new home construction. More accurately, we'd be talking about building permits, as that's where this data is gathered. At the time that this data was compiled, we didn't have St. Joe's data yet. They're working on that, and we'll get that to you as soon as it becomes available. But this is interesting. If we look at pre-recession to the recovery years, you can see the trends. Now, there is no singular path or line if you track this data. It's a little zigzaggy up and down, but you can definitely see the post-recession years or recovery, and again, that's another one that we can do the old eyeball test and drive around town and see a lot of growth and a lot of development. And with that, I'd be happy to respond to any questions or comments.
Board members, anyone have questions? I guess I had one with regard to that Department of Administration. I think there was a couple of slides. Actually, there was 2 different quotes from them, and that looked awful similar to the information we saw from the UW-Madison study like 3-4 months ago. So is it something that the Department of Administration in Wisconsin adopted? Is it the same study, or is it just happen to have similar data?
You know, it's a very good question. We are assuming it's from the same study, that a lot of this demographic data is being pulled from the same study and then compiled for different purposes, but I'm honestly not certain on that.
Okay. And I think you skipped one that was up there, and that was the City of Hudson's own comprehensive plan.
Oh, yes, thank you.
That was in 2009, and there they were anticipating a 35% increase just in the city between '08 and 2025. Now,
Yes.
obviously, we're up to 2014, so we're 6 years into that. But it would seem that we're on at least that pace to meet that 35% by that date, and the Department of Administration goes another 15 years beyond that to 2040. So.
Yep, exactly.
All right, does anyone else have questions about the growth data?
Just a comment,
Tom?
just that it's appreciated that we get a comprehensive look at this. I mean, we've heard from some in the community about birth rates and the concern about that. It certainly we've certainly gotten the birth rate information tonight as well, but all of the other information along with that. And so I think it's important that we have this as a complete and comprehensive report that gives us a better and complete view of what's happening in this community in terms of growth. So, and as you've said a couple of times, Dave, you know, it's the kind of the obvious, subjective view that we're growing. You know, we can see it. We can see houses. We see kids increases in our own schools and teachers on carts and things like this. But it's good to have quantitative data that we can use for ourselves in understanding what the need is moving forward. So I hope that this helps the community to understand on a larger and more comprehensive basis the growth in this community.
Anyone else? Yeah, and I appreciate the work you put into, looking at the multiple factors and not just isolating on focusing on one. And you had mentioned the eyeball test. Another anecdotal would be that Mary and I attended the intergovernmental meeting that meets every quarter, and that's the town chairs of St. Joe, Troy, Hudson. Tom, you obviously attended those meetings when you were president as well. And one of the things that we heard from both Troy and St. Joe, that they were surprised at the increase this year compared to the more recent times, and the hope of being, maybe coming out of this recession. And the other statement that was made by the representative from St. Joe Township is that they're going to be changing their zoning, or incorporating their own zoning, and how that goes, of course, is going to be part of a process, but those impacts have cascading effects, and we certainly don't know what the bridge is necessarily going to bring, but the comment, I think, by the town chair was he was amazed at how much land there is available for development in St. Joe Township. Obviously, we haven't seen that kind of growth in the village of North Hudson, and part of that is because of the nature of the village and it being waterlocked and a couple sides and landlocked at the top by St. Joe Township. So,
Mr.
Tom.
President, also it's kind of interesting to think that now that this bridge is going across in near Stillwater, that the effect that may have as well, that may not have been taken into account with the projections that are part of what we're seeing tonight as well, because I think that's a fairly new phenomenon since this report.
Certainly, the city's comprehensive plan's projection from 2008 wouldn't have taken into account the bridge.
Right.
So, all right. With that, then, I guess we move on in the agenda. And Mr. Secretary of the School Board, do we have anyone requesting to speak on non-agenda items? All right. And then with that introduction for topics for action, I'd like to call the folks from Hoffman and from Baird up to the front and ask the Secretary, do we have anyone who is registered to speak on this item? All right. So I guess how we're going to handle this part of the agenda is that we have these resources here, both administrators and then our consultants, and we're going to go through the various items. Sorry, my computer's doing crazy things here. Okay. We're going to go through the various items discussing secondary space for learning and addressing the grades 6 through 12. We're going to have comments and questions going through, and then once we're done with that, and I guess we don't have anyone registered to speak from the public, then we'll go through back up to A1 and then have formal motions and then further discussion among board members. But before I turn it over to Hoffman, I guess, Mary, you had some comments?
I do. Thank you. As long as my microphone works here. The HSD 2025 strategic vision begins with the words, preparing each student for post-secondary success through a culture of excellence. Hudson middle and high school students need high-quality learning experiences to prepare them for their future, to become informed, caring contributors locally, nationally, and globally. Teaching, learning, and graduate outcomes identified in HSD 2025 vision are supported and enhanced with facilities that provide access to modern classrooms, labs, and equipment. The proposed solution supports both the middle school's house concept that is valued by our parents and high school learning for the future initiatives that are designed to better support and prepare Hudson High School graduates for careers and college. With goal setting and direction and guidance from the Board of Education, the administration is very pleased to bring forward a complete package for a long-term solution to the district's secondary space needs. That, with the approval first of the Board of Education and then with our community's approval, it will address the needs for quality learning space for Hudson secondary students in grades 6 through 12 well into the future. In addition to providing modern learning and activity space for all students in grades 6 through 12, consistent with a high-performing district, The proposed secondary space long-term solution will address the overcrowding experienced both at Hudson Middle School and Hudson High School. Both schools are beyond capacity. As an example, this coming year, the middle school will use 4 classrooms in the adjacent Hudson Prairie Elementary, an increase of 1 classroom from the year before. And we'll have 12 middle school teachers will be moving their supplies and equipment for their classes on carts from classroom to classroom each day, limiting the learning experience for those students that can be implemented. And as an example, at the high school, Sandy Kovach already talked about earlier, advanced placement biology is usually a cornerstone offering in an AP program at the high school level. But the number of students with interest, lack of science lab classrooms, inadequate, outdated space make it a course that Hudson students cannot access as their peers can at other high-performing high schools. The proposed long-term solution also provides needed updates to the aging Hudson High School infrastructure, with the 2 main wings being 40 and 51 years old. This proposed reinvestment in plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical systems will ensure that the school can continue to serve Hudson students in grades 8 through 9 for many years into the future. Once again, the administration is very pleased to present the most updated information to the board for your consideration this evening regarding the proposal to address grades 6 through 12 space for learning needs. I'd like to remind you about our Hoffman representatives and once again introduce them. Sam Stotz is the project manager from Hoffman. Mark Bulkey is the land planner, and Jody Andrews is the architect.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And I want to also, as I introduce these options or the option that we're presenting, is recognize the prior boards, recognize that this is not something that we've just been thinking about for a couple months now. Those people in this room know very well how long this community has worked on this. Prior boards have worked on this going back at least to 2002 when County UU was purchased for a proposed secondary space solution. We had the referendum in 2003 on an 8-9 building. We had a task force where many person hours were spent looking at various options and ways to address the space issues. And we're sitting in a building that was a product of that task force. Rivercrest was built in response to the space needs at the elementary, and then the second job left to do was the secondary space. And prior boards have been looking at various options. We reduced it from nearly a couple dozen to this option, and that is, the proposal is to put it as 2 questions, and the first question being constructing a new 3-year high school for grades 10 to 12. This high school will have an enrollment capacity for 1,650 students with common areas designed to serve 2,000 students. It will be expandable to capacity for 2,000 students in the future if necessary. This building would comprise approximately 309,000 square feet. The competition fields for football, track, tennis, baseball, and softball. An 850-seat auditorium will be a separate question. Now, in addition, on question 1, that question will include converting, remodeling, and renovating our current high school for grades 8 through 9 with space for administration and with support services for the district administration, IT services, and professional development and training area. And then finally, converting the current middle school from a 6, 7, 8 to just grades 6 and 7. There will be a second question as proposed, if adopted by the board, to construct an 850-seat auditorium at the new high school. Why have the auditorium as a separate referendum question? Well, first, this has been the subject of several work sessions and that the board has had and where there's been much discussion. And so I just have some bullet points to cover on this point. But we know the community values the Hudson School District's performing arts programs. An auditorium is a necessary component of providing a high-quality education program. Our high school's current auditorium is able to support high-quality performances, but with less capacity than what would be preferred. With taxpayers in mind, the board wanted to keep the referendum costs under $100 million. The auditorium has an estimated cost of $6.5 million and would raise the referendum above $100 million. And based on the auditorium's use outside the school day and the community's lower demand for using this space, the board made the difficult decision to separate the referendum into 2 questions. And the board is hopeful that both questions will pass based on the community's strong support of the arts and this important supportive educational space, which would be indicative of the survey that was done. Now, other board members may have comments on this issue of 2 questions. We'll get to that when we get to our formal motions. But now I would like our consultant experts to discuss these separately. First, the construction of the high school for grades 10 through 12. What is involved in this? And I think Jody is going to take the lead on that.
I am, thank you. Actually, you know, you guys, you talked a lot about, you kind of stole my thunder there. You talked a lot about a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. The bottom line is you've been through a long process, and that's the right process to go through when you're looking at a situation like this. You're really looking at kind of the three key things that we would look at in any school district when it comes to planning. One is the physical condition of your existing facilities. The next one would be just population or growth. And the last one would be program and curriculum. You know, what kind of demands are those kind of things placing on your schools? So you've been looking at all those things for quite some time now. And you've done additional things. You've done community surveys. You've tried to find out what the community would like to do. We've come in and we've done extensive teacher interviews. We interviewed all the staff at the high school and all the staff at the middle school. And all that kind of went into the results that you're looking at tonight. I just would add one other kind of piece of background information. If you look at the number, you know, I know Jamie said approximately 309,000, but it's actually pretty specific, 308,954. We don't just guess at a number like that. That number is actually derived from input that we received during the staff interviews. That comes from standards and guidelines that are, you know, not only used in this state but also throughout the nation. And then that's actually the end result of a very detailed list of all the spaces that would go into this school. So we actually know basically how this building's going to look without actually knowing how it looks. We know how big it's going to be. We know kind of all the spaces that are in there, and we actually started to know some of the relationships too between those spaces. So that's just to kind of give you some added comfort in knowing that, you know, this isn't grabbed out of the air in terms of how the program that we're looking at here. As you talked about, you know, it's expandable to 2,000. Right now, the population in Belleville was 1,650. Where that really comes from, and we've talked about this before, is the core spaces of the building will be designed in a way that you can easily add on classrooms in the future if you need to. The kind of things that are difficult to obviously add on to are gymnasiums or kitchens or commons or those kind of things. So those are the kind of things that you want to make sure are built for 2,000 students. As we talked about, we'll have all the competition fields, football, track, tennis, baseball, and softball included in that. And the 850-seat auditorium, that's kind of where you arrived at. We looked at 750, we looked at 950. You kind of came right down in the middle there. So, you know, overall, it may seem like, you know, this is, you know, not a lot of information, but just in these simple lines here, it's really all the information that you need at this point to move forward and make the decision. I can certainly, I don't know, Jamie, if you want me to answer any questions or move on to the 8-9.
Mary?
Sorry about this microphone. Maybe it would be a good idea at this time, talking about the high school, going to the comparison of square foot per student.
Thank you. I think we have that slide up here too.
Yeah. The next slide would be the proposed 8-9, converting the high school and.
Yep. Let's just jump, there we go. So how does that roughly 309,000 square feet, where does that kind of land in relationship to other schools and other districts and basically throughout the country? The graph that you have up there right now, this is for the region of Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. This takes a historical look at square foot per student, going back to 2005 all the way through 2014. This is actually information that's accessible to anyone. It's published by a magazine called School Planning and Management. They do a construction report every year. It's online if you want to go look it up. But this is, they have it by a national average, and then they also have it by region. So more appropriate for you would be by region. Now understand there's a lot of variables that go into that average up there. Some of these buildings have certain spaces that you're looking at, some of them don't. But this is just kind of a good, rule of thumb of where square footages have been landing throughout the year. You can see maybe in 2013 there's a little bit of an anomaly there, where the regional average was all the way up at 305 square feet per student. But normally, it's in that 200, 205 range, a little bit below that. But you can also see kind of by the bar graph there, it's a trend that's increasing. And that's just in terms of a lot of the same things that you're talking about, the academy-based learning, those kind of things are taking up a little bit more space in these schools, and you're seeing that reflected here. So kind of getting even closer to home here, comparable high schools just in this region of western Wisconsin, eastern Minnesota. These are, projects that we looked at kind of in this area. This is all, again, published data. River Falls High School, their school was built, I think about 10 years ago, 277,200 square feet for 1,200 students. That averages about 231. As I'm going through these, you can see right on the bottom there, your new high school, as it's programmed at 308,954 for 1,650 students, that's 187.2 square feet per student. If you add in the auditorium, that brings it up to 197.3. But you can see right next door here at New Richmond, that 295,000 square feet. For 1,200 students, that's at 245.8 square feet. Shakopee over in Minnesota, 321,000 for 1,600 is about 201 for them. Lakeville, 370,000, 1,800 students, 205.6. And East Ridge High School, 380,000 square feet for 1,800 students is 211. You can kind of see a pattern developing. The lower the number of students gets, the higher the square footage tends to go per student. So you want to try and get close to that range that you're in. You're looking at 1,650. I would really encourage you to look at, the Shakopees or the Lakevilles or even the East Ridge there. Those are going to be kind of in your student range. But you can see, obviously, it's right up there that you're below both of those averages, even with the auditorium in there. So how you're stacking up against other projects that are happening in the area is actually pretty good in terms of being efficient and kind of hitting that target of right where you want to be with square feet per student.
Mr. President?
Tom.
Could I ask a question, Jody? I
Sure.
mean, in this regard, when we're looking at the square footage per student and the comparables, particularly as you pointed out, Shakopee and Lakeville, because they're closer to our student population, do we have any concerns that we're not building it big enough? Whereas Shakopee, Lakeville, have they built too big? I have that question.
To answer that very specifically, square footage per student wouldn't be the first place I would go when I'm talking about your school. I would go to the program, because that very specifically responds to the needs of your district. And that's where that line-by-line analysis of what you need and based on the curriculum that you're teaching right now, that's a better fit for what you are. So if there's something in that number that shouldn't be there, it's either eliminating or adding a program at this point. So it's really tailored to specifically your school district. This is a good kind of gauge and rule of thumb, but I wouldn't be making planning decisions based on this solely.
Okay. So, Joe, just a follow-up to that then, is it your belief and feeling from your firm that we have the right amount of space for the students that we currently have and are projecting to have for the program that we're establishing for this?
I'm extremely confident that you're right where you want to be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and with that, you had the examples of Shakopee and so forth. Are those 3-year high schools or 4-year high schools, do you know, that we're comparing to?
Off the top of my head, Jamie, I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But again, as we look at what this is looking at, square feet per student, it's really more towards the student number than the grade levels addressed. Because
All right.
as you guys know, 9th grade freshman level starts to morph more towards high school. It can go either way, yes, but I mean, the programs are relatively the same.
All right. And I'm thinking out, again, into the future. So if you're planning this building expandable to 2,000 and so forth, and allowing future school boards to have flexibility if they were to add a grade to this building, would that make a significant difference when it comes down to the average square foot, whether it's a 3-year high school or a 4-year high school?
That's not going to make as significant of a difference if you looked at something like maybe changing programs. You know, like I mentioned, the academy program does have an influence on that. If you looked at, God only knows what's coming down the line. I mean, we can't see into that crystal ball, but as far as education goes, but there could be changes in the future. Now, we try and design facilities flexible enough to adapt to that, but, you know, still there is that unknown. So I would say confidently that you're going to have enough flexibility here to expand how you need to expand in the future that's appropriate for those needs.
And I suppose the other question would be, how does this projection for the proposed high school compare to what we have now, both in terms of number of square foot, but also as far as ability to meet the needs for our programming, for our academies, and for achieving the goals of Vision 2025?
I think that's, again, that's a great question because, you know, at the workshop, we looked at, you know, how what you have compares to what you need. And, you know, I think we kind of ran down that list in general areas of kind of where you were seeing increases and where you weren't. I think across the board, you're seeing a general increase in the amount of square footage per program. But that's really reflective of the fact that there's a lot of programs that are undersized or don't have adequate square footage right now at your existing high school. And I think you guys have talked about that, you know, pretty extensively, and you understand that. I mean, there's some very small classrooms, you know, 600-700 square foot classrooms that exist in high school that you're shoving programs into to make it work, and it's kind of what you're doing is you're making it work right now.
And then the collaboration areas, as far as what we presently have compared to what's projected for need for both small collaboration as well as large.
Yeah, the collaboration spaces really aren't present to a great extent in your existing high school. Those will be present in the new high school. And again, we can design those in a way that are flexible enough that if needs change in the future, those spaces can be adapted and changed in use. So, you know, it may become a different space, but you want to leave yourself some flexibility along that standpoint.
Okay. Any other questions for Jody on the proposed 3-year building? Now let's move then to the converting the current high school to an 8-9 plus administration plus IT services and professional development training area.
So again, Jamie took some of my thunder there. He just listed all the things that are included in this, which really answers the question of, you know, as the biggest question here is capacity. Let's just throw it out there. You know, why can we fit so many students and programs into this building right now, and we're not going to be able to fit as much in the future? Well, one of the biggest reasons that you just threw right out there is the fact that the administrative services are going to be put into this building now, and IT is going to be put into this building now, and professional development is going to be in this building now. So those pieces are taking up space in this existing building. And the other side of that coin is, and again, you've reviewed all these options, and I think you probably understand this pretty well, but as we even develop this, you know, I think, you know, we've talked in the past about the initial thought was there's just going to be so much space left over in this building that, you know, we're not going to know what to do with it. But as you kind of went through the process and you really start to understand how things actually plug into this, and that's why this diagram becomes very important, because you, instead of just saying, well, theoretically we're going to fit so many students in here, you're actually looking at specific spaces and you're saying, okay, well, where can we actually put these? Where are the science going to go? Where are science classrooms and labs going to go? Are we going to change that location? Probably not. So those are going to stay there. But how do we fit into this building the concepts that are already existing at your current middle school? That's where the collaboration spaces and that start to figure in here. So, you know, all these things start to lay out and start to kind of work with the existing inefficiencies of this building. You know, classroom size, science labs that are, you know, 800 square feet when they really should be 1,300 or 1,400 square feet. You know, all those things are kind of recognized and start to play themselves out as you look at this diagram. So that's a very long-winded answer to the whole capacity question, but, you know, it is a complex question. You just can't keep it as to a simple, well, we've got, you know, X number of students now, we should be able to fit X number of students in the future. That would be okay if you're just plugging them into the same thing, but you're not. You're changing programs, you're changing use. You're adapting that to be an 8-9 school. So it's very important that you understand that, you know, it's different. It's going to be a different school, and it's going to operate differently within the confines of what's there right now. So I covered all the things that are in there. Again, you know, I just reiterate, this is just a refinement of the plan that you've been looking at all along for this facility. We're still identifying a lot of the same remodeling areas, looking at remodeling those existing classrooms in the 70 edition, remodeling some other spaces for Strive and for Family and Consumer Ed, and then also for the administrative services area. Big spaces like the gym, the gyms, the auditorium, the kitchen, the commons, you know, they are what they are. As we talked about at the work session, you know, the kitchen is still going to remain your production kitchen here. They will be doing production here. There'll still be kitchens at the new facility, but you're going to be creating a new space at the new high school that's not as big as this one.
And I don't know if some of the print is large enough for the public to see, and certainly I don't know how well it translates on camera, but can you just show generally the area where the administration would be moved in and how many square foot we're talking about as compared to what the administration has now at its separate building out on Exit 4?
Separate buildings, because we're talking about IT too. As far as where it is on the plan here, it's kind of in the upper left. It's behind the West Gym. It's put there very specifically to take advantage of maybe an access on the back side of the building that would be separate from the middle school entrance or the 8-9 school entrance on the front of the building. It's approximately 13,000 square feet of remodeling. When you compare that, Jamie, to what you have right now, between what we're estimating that's used for IT, what we're estimating is used for administrative services, it's over 16,000 that you currently have. So that's being shrunk a little bit. And I will tell you that that still doesn't take into consideration some of like storage spaces and those kind of things that wouldn't necessarily be accommodated here.
All right. Any other questions from board members on the conversion of the current high school to the 8-9 and the administration or other purposes?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Maybe it was said and I didn't hear it, but just by way of clarification, the Administrative Services Center, as you said, is in a separate building, but the building across the parking lot, we also have our IT space, which is going to be going here. So that lease will no longer be needed.
And is that also going to be in the general upper left, the IT?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Correct.
But this also would be putting it back in the high school, which is where it was before we started having our space issues, puts it back in a center that's more centrally located to the whole district as well.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions on that? I think you can briefly touch on the middle school and what's happening there, whether that is going to take a lot of bricks and mortar or a lot of architectural work to accomplish the removal of one grade.
Your middle school, as it sits, is actually in pretty good shape. Your biggest problem, as you've already talked about tonight, is you just have too many students in there. They're being pushed out into other facilities already. This is really this project will alleviate that space need there. That will free up some space and allow you to grow and live in that facility adequately.
All right. Any other questions for Jody? I think we might have more later when we get down to maybe like item number 4, which is the project budget, but anything now specifically on explanation of the reconstruction that's going to occur? All right, seeing none, then let's move on to the land purchase agreement and site costs. Tim, you want to discuss this? And
Sure, yeah. And then Mark Bulke will also assist here as we go through it. So the big question is, what site and where is it located?
where is it going to be built?
Where is it going to be built? Yeah. So as you can see, Rivercrest and the site right below that, at the corner of County F and Red Brick Road, is the site. That site currently is about 70 acres. You'll see as we go through, we're not purchasing the full 70, but we'll be under that, and we'll go through that in a moment. But as you get a sense for location, you can see certainly an advantage to having 2 school sites adjacent to each other. We also have the advantage of being right across from the Camp St. Croix here, which has been a great partnership currently with Rivercrest. And so, again, just to give you an idea of where the site is. And so we'll go to the next page. And this is a conceptual site layout. And I can tell you, as Mark has reminded us several times, that this design or this layout will probably change over time. It's not exact, but it's a way to look. It's really a site capacity analysis. It's to determine whether the site can hold what we plan to develop. So again, looking at, you can see the building zone, and that's not just the physical building itself, that's the area, the drive, and access points around the building. You can see we've got 3 access points, primary access off County F, and a primary access off of Red Brick, and then a secondary access, which would be more of a limited access off of County FF or Cooley Trail. These are not, again, this is a process that we have to work through. This would be how we would lay it out now, but we have to go through the different talking with the county, talking with the township, et cetera, as we go through this. So some of these things could change. You can see one of the advantages to this site is there are opportunities for Rivercrest and the high school to share some space. So we've got practice softball and practice baseball fields up on Rivercrest, and but we want to make sure that Rivercrest maintains their existing outdoor classroom. That's very important to the programming of this site. And it's important to note too, we're not going to be funneling any high school traffic through Rivercrest. That is all going to be going down F, or not going down Cooley Trail or Red Brick Road. So we're just sharing field space, etc. So going through the additional pieces of it, you can see there's additional practice fields. We've got the competition football track, soccer. We've got baseball and softball competition fields, and then we've got tennis courts. And we note 12 courts because that is the number that allows us to have to hold competitions. Currently, with tennis the way it is at this point, we don't have enough courts to have those competitions. So this would allow that. Bart, I'll turn it over to you if you have some additional comments.
Boy, I don't have much to say after all that. But no, Tim, you said it very well. I guess a couple of things I'll just reiterate, and Tim mentioned this also, is that this is, it's not a design yet. It's an analysis to understand the capacity of the site, and that was the purpose of it. I know I've told you that several times. I just want to make sure that that's made. I guess I say that publicly, is that we don't want to look at this as a design. A couple of things too that Tim mentioned also I would like to emphasize is that the opportunity here, I think, to share land with Rivercrest and create a campus, kind of a community hub, a community center. I think there's a real opportunity by choosing this site, and that sharing of land allows you to have adequate land area for both Rivercrest and the high school. And fortunately, Rivercrest was on what typically would be larger than was necessary for a typical elementary school, so that may be of benefit to you now. And the other thing is although this can be a campus, it can be a community center, a hub for the community, there is plenty of opportunity to separate, as Tim said, the student, the high school students and the building from the elementary school. So if there's concern about that, we have opportunities through the design process to do those things, and I think we would definitely do those, implement those as part of the design. I think that was it. I think Tim covered everything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions. One other thing, what we put on here as far as Jody mentioned the program for the building, there's also a site program, and this is a very, I'll call it a typical high school site program, which would include the number of fields, the competition fields, the practice fields, and so forth. So it's not overly generous, but it's a very typical program that we see, and it fits very nicely on this site.
I'm going to add one other thing that, as you see down in that southeast corner, there are 2 residential lots. One's 3 acres and one's 4 acres. The current owners are going to remain on those properties. Those properties will be, the 1 3-acre lot will be subdivided off from the main parcel, and there is an existing there. And then the plan would be to relocate. There's a home. It's a little bit difficult to see, but more towards the middle to the western part of the property. There is a residence there that will be relocated to the 3-acre lot. And then there's an existing residence on the 4-acre lot that will remain. And we will give an additional 2 acres, although they'll have an additional 2 acres onto that. So a total of 7 acres that won't be school district owned. And again, we'll get a little bit more into the detail of that as we get into the purchase agreement.
Do you want to talk about the
So any
purchase
questions?
agreement, or do you want to just talk about any questions about the site? Well, we've got that map up. This is something that is just proposed, but has, I guess the question mark is, do you feel that it's got sufficient room for the programming that we want for a school of this size?
Yes.
All right. Then why don't you go into
Okay. So yeah, I'll go next into the land and land costs and the off-site cost estimates. So based on what you've seen on that diagram and splitting off some additional acreage there for the current owners of the property, we're estimating about 60, it would be about 64, maybe 63 to 65 usable acres of land. That will be determined by a survey. So the land cost is estimated at $3,840,000. As I mentioned before, there's home relocation costs that will be involved, and then there's some demolition of the family farmstead that's really on the corner of the property, the corner of Red Brick and County F, and so that's estimated at $275,000. The off-site utilities, this includes public water and sewer, and again, in the agreement, there's a contingency for annexation, and of course there's a contingency for passage of a referendum. This is all contingent on that. But the $950,000 covers annexation fees, core facility fees, utility connection, and impact fees of getting public water and sewer out to the site. We have off-site road improvements of $2,335,000, and those costs were developed, and Mark can get into a little bit of detail on that, but those costs were developed with our engineer and Mark, and through discussions with county representatives, and looking at what would be required. Is if you look at Red Brick, that will have to be upgraded to accommodate the traffic into the site, and the county will require some upgrades, additional lanes on County F. So, Mark, do you have additional comments on that?
Yeah, a couple of things. I guess there's been a lot of, you're seeing a very simplified summary. I just want to emphasize that there was a lot of work put into this. We've had numerous meetings and discussions with the town, the county, the city. We had, even on down to the demolition costs, we had a local contractor look at things like that. So there's a lot of information to back up these numbers. They're all obviously projections without specific design. That's the best we can do right now, but I'm pretty comfortable that they were well put together and are as accurate as we can be at this time. I guess I won't get into the details. If you'd like a little bit more detail about the potential road improvements or utilities, I'd be glad to do that. I will say the third item on there, the off-site utilities, including public water, sewer, et cetera, we had a good example to work from. That's this project at Rivercrest. We had to do exactly the same thing as we would have to do on this new site is we had to go through an annexation process. We had to look at extending public utilities. So we have that data and updated that to today's dollars. So that was some good, I guess, a very good example right next to the site you're looking at right now. And again, answer any questions.
Mr. President, just
Tom.
regarding the offsite utilities and public water and sewers, you've discussed, both Tim and Mark. That's contingent upon annexation, I assume, and there's also another potential, and that is private well and septic. And so, can you talk a little bit about those potential costs as a substitute to what that might be?
Yeah, there's a potential if annexation would not occur, that you could do a private on-site septic and well on the property. There's additional cost to that. It does take up some additional property, so it's not, and certainly from an overall standpoint, you'd much rather be on public utilities versus having your own system. There's a lot of benefit to that. So, Mark, I don't know if you've got anything additional to add.
Yes, the site was deemed appropriate for that, if necessary, for private septic and well, if it was needed. The cost difference, there would be some cost difference to do that. And I think the other important thing is if it did take up additional land, it's a pretty minimal amount of land. It wouldn't consume a large area, and typically you can work that into the design in green areas between other elements of the project.
Just as a follow-up, can you talk a little bit about the cost difference up or down, significant, lower or higher?
Yeah, there's a cost range, and it is higher to have your own utilities, and I believe it was somewhere around $600,000 to $800,000 more, roughly.
Any other questions then? I guess I don't know if you need to take us through the offer to purchase line by line, but do you have a summary for us as far as the highlights?
Well, I thought we'd go line by line.
I prefer not.
I'm going to have Jay Squires, our attorney, join us.
Okay.
So Jay's going to walk you through the finer points of the agreement. So it'll be pretty summary format unless you've got specific questions to it. So again, Jay Squires is a certified real estate attorney and has been working through this with us. We've done quite a bit of work on it, and so I'll let Jay take it from there and discuss the finer points of it.
Good evening. I take it by your comment you don't want the line-by-line version?
Please not, yes.
I'll give you the capsulized version. And I have been working with staff in memorializing into an agreement the negotiations and discussions that they've had with the owner of the property just south of here. You do have this, I understand, in your packet, and it has been signed by the property owners. So if the board approves it tonight, it will be an agreement. Just the highlights, as Tim mentioned, the acreage, the acreage on the site is approximately 72 acres. He mentioned the homesteads that would be carved out. That's dealt with in the agreement. The district would be purchasing 64 to 67 acres. The important point, the purchase price is based on the acreage, so it's not, the number of acres is not significant. The purchase price would be $60,000 an acre, excluding rights-of-way and easement areas. So if there's right-of-way for the road, if there are easements on the site, that would not count towards the acreage. A survey would be done, as Tim mentioned, to identify what that acreage, that would be at the school district's cost. There would be additional costs associated with the acquisition. In addition to the survey to determine the acreage, a survey would be done so that the homesteads could be subdivided and created as separate lots of record. For the sellers, that would be the school district's responsibility. And as Tim mentioned, the school district would contribute up to $222,000 towards the cost to relocate and reestablish one of the homes to one of those homesteads. We have a process worked out where there would be receipts provided, and we'd be able to verify that those costs were actually incurred. The closing would be February 17 of 2015. There would be continued occupancy allowed pursuant to an agreement. There'd have to be a separate agreement that covered things like insurance and damages and things that may happen during the continued occupancy. They would be allowed to remove crops up through the end of April of 2015 and would be allowed to continue to reside in the home up until September 1 of 2015. I've not been involved in it, but I understand there have been some discussions with the planning consultants to be sure that's consistent with how they would envision the project, and I understand that that date from that perspective is acceptable. The important point, as has been mentioned, is the agreement contains a whole series of contingencies because of the things that have to be done in order to locate a school on this site. And those are outlined at page 11 of the agreement. Annexation is a contingency, so annexation would need to occur, or the district could essentially back out of the agreement. All the land use approvals that would be necessary, rezoning and other approvals and permits that would need to be acquired by the school is also a contingency. Conducting investigations and environmental studies, I think some of that has probably been done already, but there's additional opportunity for the district to go in there and really evaluate the site, do soil borings and things like that to make sure that there aren't any surprises, and to the extent there are, there's coverage for that. An opportunity for us to, once the agreement is approved, to get all the easements and covenants and restrictions that may exist of record and analyze those to make sure there isn't a restriction that adversely affects the intended use of the property. Extension of utilities, passage of the referendum, and then finally the approval of the county in subdividing the property to allow the homesteads to be separate lots, which really is more for the benefit of the sellers. And then two final substantive provisions. They wish to have a fence constructed along the, if you saw the diagram, along the homestead line between the school site. And that provision's in there. It doesn't require a certain type of fence, just a typical fence that you would see, so that would be determined as part of the project. And then finally, a right of first refusal that if they wish to sell the homesteads at some point in the future, the district would at least have the opportunity to exercise the right to be able to acquire those if at some future point you decided that's something that was of interest. So that's really the agreement in a nutshell. I hope that wasn't too line by line.
No, I just had one question there.
Sure.
With regard to the subdivision of the property and the fact that there's going to be the two homesteads cut out, would that, and this is all contingent on annexation of the rest of the property for the school to be in the city and get city utilities.
Mm-hmm.
Will the homesteads be in the city, or do they remain in Troy Township?
You know, we've never had any specific discussion. I would imagine their desire would be to remain in the township.
Right, the owner's desire to remain in the township of Troy.
Okay.
So that would be carved out in the annexation process.
Okay. Is there any other questions on that? And as I understand how the contingencies work, I mean, they have to be fulfilled. Most of these should be fulfilled. Do you expect by the closing? I mean, they have to be. I mean, once you close, there's no backing out at that point.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, they do, and I think that February date would be adequate based on our best judgment and determination about how long these processes can occur to allow for them to happen or not. So we would be in a position to be able to either close or not. If they aren't, we can always extend the closing, reach an agreement with them to allow more time, but I think that's adequate time.
In addition to extending the close, you can also waive contingencies as well as
You can.
need arises. All right.
And the best example of that would be if for some reason annexation didn't occur, but yet the board determined that you could still go forward with a private septic system and well, now that's maybe an option that you could look at waiving a contingency if that situation presented itself.
All right. Any other questions by board members on this? All right, well, we're plugging along here now to the commitment of the general fund balance. As I understand it, board has already officially committed $3.4 million from the general fund for this referendum, I guess land acquisition or whatever purpose it would be, but this is an additional 1.6. Tim, why don't you tell us how we arrive at that additional fund?
Sure. Yeah. So as you can see, if you go to that first line under general fund, that's where we wound up June 30th of 2013. So just referencing the very end of our fiscal year, you can see, as Jamie mentioned, there's $3.4 million that the board had committed previously, a couple of years ago, to secondary space for learning. And when we looked at where we project to wind up this 13-14 school year, we've got a good news is we've got a positive variance to budget, and primarily due to health insurance. We switched, this was our first year switching over to the self-funding of health and dental insurance, and again, looking at that, we had a positive variance there, so that certainly helps. So it was about we're estimating about 2.4 at this point. Things are not closed out yet, so that number might change, but we'd recommend that you commit and take an official board action to commit $1.6 million additional to the 3.4, so you'd have a total of $5 million to set aside. This is something that we did when we built Rivercrest. What that allows you to do then is lower the amount that you're going to bond for, and it's going to lower the impact to the taxpayer. So again, that's $1.6 million that you'd commit, and so a total of $5 million.
Any questions about that issue? All right, then let's just keep moving with regard to the total project referendum budget. Tim, I guess this is yours.
Yep, I'll walk you through the totals rather. So again, looking at tracking to have two questions, and so question number one is the bulk of it, and that's the 3-year high school and the competition fields. You can see the component breakdown for each of the fields and the tennis courts. So that first subtotal is $75 million. And then we went through the land purchase and the associated off-site costs, and that's 7.4. And then the conversion of the high school to an 8-9, of our current high school to an 8-9. So that includes upgrade finishes. So those are things like flooring, paint, ceiling tile, really trying to improve what we've got there, improve that environment. The renovations, as Jody talked about in the floor plan, so renovating the east side for art, Strive, classroom size increases, and collaboration space. And then renovation on the west side for science, family and consumer ed, and collaboration space as well. And then, as was mentioned, the plan would be the district office would move back into offices at the current high school. The administrative service center would be sold eventually. We'd also be moving the ITS space, so as Lynn had mentioned, that leased space would be no more. We'd consolidate ITS into the existing high school as well, and then some professional development and training space. We do, with the size of the renovation, we do need to add fire protection, so sprinkler systems, about almost $1.4 million. And then there's dollars in for site allowance. The site allowance is mainly going to be the parking lot improvements and some stormwater. We'll have to have some stormwater improvements to the site as well. Moving on, included in the 8-9 are, as you remember, we had an assessment done by ATS&R for the current high school. And so looking at a building that is 40 to 50 years old in some parts, and looking at improving and really upgrading, getting to the end of these life cycles on some of these larger pieces of equipment, such as boilers, steam systems. So HVAC is the largest portion of that. Then there's some plumbing in there, and then upgrades to electrical. And these are things, some of these items are going to have longer term savings for us, because when we're talking about systems that are 40 and 50 years old, they're just not very efficient anymore. So that total is 15.5. And then converting the current middle school to a 6-7. We haven't talked much about that, but the programming is very similar to what we have now, so we don't anticipate any additional cost for the current middle school. So that gets us to question one. So the total project cost is $104,965,000. And then if we take off the fund balance commitment that you take action on tonight, that drops the bonding total down to $99,965,000. Okay, then if we move on to question number 2, talked a little bit about the auditorium tonight. So it's at 850-seat auditorium. That cost is $6 million, and I'm going to round $6,550,000. That's we have to round those up to the nearest 5,000 for bonding, and that would be the second question on the ballot. So, any questions?
Well, first of all, I think we need, and we don't need to go through the old ATS&R report, but we were given that report back in September, just before last year's annual meeting, and it had a number like 36 million that would need to be invested in the high school, and this is completely separate from expanding any kind of secondary space or building any new buildings, correct?
Right. This is just really upgrading some of the critical systems in that building.
All right. And I believe that we have some expertise here about, what I want to know is what we have here for facility infrastructure for the current high school, these dollars adequate for addressing that? And do you feel that this is the optimal time to be, incorporating those infrastructure changes when you're remodeling the high school?
I think I can answer that. Let me make sure I understand your question. You're talking the conversion to the 8-9, is that dollar amount of the funds set aside for that going to be adequate?
Well, you can separate it out separately, that's fine, yes. But, I mean, how were these figures arrived at, I guess, is the answer.
What we've done in the conversion for the 8-9, we've looked at a number of different things, and we started actually with the good work. There was a lot of work that was put into that ATS&R report, so we started with that. But then we also had a lot of conversations with Jim Stasko, who was obviously very familiar with that building and understood what needed to be done. The lion's share of that is the HVAC, and we started to look at what needs to be done versus what can be done in maybe phases. And what it boiled down to is there really wasn't a very good logical point to split that into phases because of the way that system is designed. So the largest portion of that 12.8 million, is really just a necessity of the age of the building and trying to keep up with that operational life for the building to continue it and use it in the future needed to be addressed. The other items in there, and Tim had mentioned it actually, like fire protection was one that when you start to go through, and as Jody had outlined before, there's some renovated spaces that would need to happen. You start to breach some triggers that require to have the fire protection installed. So some of the things that you saw in there, the renovation for the Strive, classroom, FACE, science, the district office, all of that is going to need to be done as a matter of making it functional for that space, and those are adequate dollars based off of some renovation costs that we're seeing in the market now and projecting what that would cost for at the time that this would be bidding. Those are generating that fire protection. The site allowance, in addition to just the parking, there's also some landscaping, some curbing, and then obviously the stormwater that would need to be done with that as well. And that was actually cut down from what ATS&R's report had in it of close to, I think, 4 million just for the site improvement. That was based off of what we saw needed to be addressed with some areas that are starting to fail and would need to be upgraded, we'll say.
In their number, they also included replacement of every square inch of pavement that's
Correct.
at that site. And
Correct.
there may be savings from that because we won't have 8th and 9th graders driving to school and needing
Correct.
as much parking there. Okay. So is there any questions then on this?
Yes, Mr. President, I have a question.
Yeah, Carrie.
With the two separate referendum questions, on the question number 2, with the construction of the auditorium at $6.5 million, if that were added later, would that be a similar cost aside from any higher labor or construction material costs, or would that be a different number?
That's a good question. That would actually be a different number. What we've taken into account is obviously you've got strength in numbers, if you will, the power of the volume of having that project there. The auditorium is priced accordingly for that. If it was going to be something that was a separate question at a later time, I think some of the other, sorry.
That's right.
I've never been told I was quiet.
These are not very sensitive mics,
Wow.
thankfully.
I feel happy. Now I lost my train of thought, actually. The pricing for that would be reflected, and honestly, I'd have to go back and do a little bit more calculating, but I would estimate that to probably be about 20 to 30% almost more if it was just going to be an auditorium that was added at a later date individually at that time.
Point of clarification, the new construction of the $70,900,000 though includes a design that would allow for an auditorium, whether it passes in this referendum or future date.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Let's keep it rolling then. Financing plan. This is where we get down to how is this going to impact the taxes?
Yeah, so we've got Brian Brewer from Baird, and Brian is going to give us some information, kind of big picture on what's happening with the markets and interest rates, and then drilling down to how this referendum is going to impact taxpayers. So with that, Brian, I'll let you walk through the different pictures we have.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This first chart, I believe I showed this when I was here in June with the refinancing of your prior referendum debt. But it gives a good visual of how interest rates can and do move each day, each month, each year. It gives us a pretty good 30-year snapshot of this. This is a daily index of municipal bonds for AAA rated entities. And if you recall from that conversation, the school district is a AA1, which is one notch off of the AAA. So among the highest you can possibly attain as a school district. I drew a line across the top line to show that the current 20-year index rate is hovering right around a 3%. There was only one other period in the last 30 years where we were at or below that 3% level, and that was towards the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013. And currently we're about 0.5% higher than that, but still in a very, very low interest rate environment, especially that it converges with the timing of you addressing and determining the comprehensive solution, secondary space solution. That will help to take more of taxpayer dollars and put it towards the project cost and less towards the interest cost related to municipal bond repayments. The other two lines show you a 10-year index rate, and the bottom line is a 5-year index rate. So as we discuss, and we'll discuss more often should you have a successful referendum, bond repayments there's an interest rate for each year, each maturity of a bond schedule, different than what you typically see as a home finance mortgage, where you typically see one rate. Here it's a collection of 20 different rates in a 20-year payback. One thing I did do to give you a relative figure, knowing that the all-time low was about 0.5% lower, and this will help when we talk about the estimates that we're using currently and give you a little bit of a sensitivity. On the total project cost financed over a 20-year, and it's actually all in, it ends up being a 22-year repayment, but if for every 0.5% that the interest rates move for that total financing, it adds or subtracts approximately $7.5 million of interest cost. So the fact that you're currently locking in interest rates or would be locking in interest rates in a very favorable time, that's saving significant taxpayer dollars during the 22-year repayment of the bond issue. One other thing to note is that before we leave this page is that a year ago, basically December of 2013, we were roughly 100 basis points or one full percentage point higher in this index rate than we are today. So you've benefited in timing-wise that interest rates throughout 2014 have steadily improved leading up to this fall decision of the community. So you'll notice when we get to the interest rate assumptions that we're putting forward to give the tax impact estimates, we're being more conservative than what the current rates are, because we're coming out of a year time period where rates went up 120 basis points and back down about 100 basis points. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of potential for interest rate movements when rates are as historically low as they are and have been over the last 5 years. So any questions on this chart? I look at it daily, and I know it's new to you on the board, but I just wanted to give you a background of where we are in the interest rate market.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just
Go ahead.
wanted to ask you to can you clarify why Hudson does not have AAA status where AAA won?
Despite Tim and my efforts on the rating conference calls throughout the years, the rating agency has different metrics for the categories that they'll assign. And within that, one of the largest components for Moody's rating process is the size and diversity of the entity's tax base. So the property values within the school district boundaries and what it's comprised of. You're currently at approximately $3.2 billion of property value within the school district. And relative to the AAA ratings across the country, generally you see them more in the above 10 to 12 billion in terms of size. And there's a significant amount of industrial and commercial tax base, whereas Hudson's tax base is more heavily slanted towards the residential and commercial type tax base. So it's really not through the things that are within the board's control. So all of those they've repeated are well into that AAA highest level category. It's just things that are, demographic and location based that you can't control.
All right, any other questions on this slide? Then we go then.
Mr. President,
Yeah,
just so I'm clear on this, Brian, and it's showing August 14 as sitting the interest rate showing on a 20-year note, 3%. Are we projecting, at the point in which we actually take a bond out, and actually get into a financing program, what that interest rate might be, and is that possible to project what it might be at that point? Or is this what you're telling us tonight, is that you're anticipating that we could looking at a 3% interest rate?
No, I am not saying that.
Okay.
This is what the index rate is as we've been preparing the estimates.
Right.
We used a much higher assumption rate, planning assumption, because again, living through the last 18 months of rates going down and back up and then back down, and knowing that you have 3 more months until the actual referendum date and more months before actually finalizing interest rates, that I wanted more planning cushion in there should rates go higher. I want the message you're communicating to be a conservative one, and to be one that even if rates do normalize during this time period, you're still within the tax impact estimates that you're using during the communication process.
All right. Next slide.
So this slide, I think you've also seen various iterations of the blue portion, the lower left corner of the slide, which represents the issued and outstanding referendum-approved debt payments for prior buildings like Rivercrest and the other elementary projects, and maybe a portion of the middle school project. But it shows the remaining payments and how they step down in the coming years, which is one of the planning items that we've been discussing, is that when and if the board develops a secondary space solution, our plan would be to structure the new payments related to that new investment in a way that wraps around the remaining payments on the prior investments, ultimately to try and smooth out the tax impact over and above what is currently being committed towards annual debt payments related to referendum improvements. So the lower left corner, the blue shading is prior debt. The red bars represent how the future repayments related to both question 1 and question 2. You'll notice that we're stepping into the payments over the first 5 years and arriving at the max combined debt payment in 2019. Ultimately, again, that's trying to balance out the taxpayers that are here in the next 5 years that are finishing some of the prior referendum commitments and starting what would be the next referendum commitment, ultimately to try and level out that tax impact over and above what's currently committed towards referendum approved debt.
So that first bar, the one that says the 4 million for 2014, wasn't that just like 4.6 previously in our previous budget? Or maybe it's our current budget.
I don't know if it was this current 13-14 previous budget, but within the past 2 or 3 years, it was higher at about 4.6. This last year was about 4.2.
About 4, a little over 4.1.
Yeah.
Is part of this blue, the reduction attributable to the refinancing or the refunding that we did on the rate recently?
Yes. Okay. At each opportunity, with interest rates moving throughout the prior referendum investments, the board and this board and previous boards have taken action to try and refinance and lower interest costs related to those debt financings.
What assumption is this making? Maybe it's this slide and the combination with the next slide, but what assumption is it making with the growth of the tax base within the school district?
We're modeling a 2% growth in the tax base. Last year, the district had a little over 4% growth. And we're within a week's time of knowing the municipal values, which ultimately get modified by the Department of Revenue and become your school district valuation, which you receive on October 1st. So in the next week or week and a half, we should be able to provide an estimate of what the 2014 year-over-year change is, which will give us another data point, fresher data point to update the schedule.
So for an example, if that ends up being a repeat of last year of 4%, that would then take this down?
Yes.
The number of the impact on the taxes would be even less?
Yes.
But you're making assumptions over time.
I
so,
understand.
yep.
Okay. Yeah, you're not just looking at any one year.
Correct.
All right. So what's the next slide show us?
So before the text boxes relate to this next slide. So, we had text boxes in there. The question 1, a $1.15 per thousand increase over the current debt payments equates to the maximum mill rate increase related to question 1 only. So $1.15 increase over current. If question 1 and 2 were approved, that number would go up to $1.28. So an additional 13 cents related to question 2. So that, and then again, stepped in over that 5-year period and beginning with 2014-15. So the levy setting this fall, October, November, would encompass the first debt payment related to the plan.
Okay. And the next slide was intended to show the impact depending on the value of the home.
Yes. So this is a different visual, again, showing the $1.15 per thousand for question 1 and the 13 cents per thousand on question 2. And in the middle, I have different sample property values, home values, that convert that $1.15 per thousand into what the increase on your tax bill would be if it were, if you owned a $100,000 property, it would go up $115 or $10 a month. If you own a $300,000 property, it would go up $345 or $29 a month related to question 1.
And that's regardless of which municipality they happen to live in, because town of Hudson's taxes aren't the same as the city of Hudson and so forth.
This is the portion of the tax bill that would be the school district's portion, which is levied and collected on all fair market value of each of the municipalities, then delivered to the municipality to collect. So the numbers will be different once it gets collected at the municipal level, but over time that equalizes or normalizes as the assessment to equalized value comes, is adjusted within every 5 years, I believe, is what the municipality process is for that.
That was a lot more technical answer than I was expecting, but I think I understand. All right. Okay. Any other questions on this, or do you have
I
another
one
point?
more. I do want to point out some of the assumptions because Tom had brought it up earlier. This plan is built to take advantage of some of the timing in a multi-year build-out. You won't need all the funds right away, so we'll try to phase in the financings to take advantage of some of the different borrowing tax rules that are available to you, one of those being bank qualified status, I believe we have discussed before. So we have a multi-year borrowing plan with 20-year borrowings. Ultimately, from the time of November of 2014, the final payment would be in 2036. So that's where I come up with that roughly 22-year repayment window. The current borrowing estimates is a blended rate of a 4.3%. And Tom, to your question earlier, with the index rate at that 3%, the district's borrowing is probably somewhere around a 3.4-ish right now. So when we started these estimates, we were targeting about 75 to 80 basis points above current market. Well, rates have come down a little bit since we started doing this, so it seems a little more conservative at this point. We also, again, I mentioned earlier, we modeled a scenario that said, well, what if we weren't as conservative and we took 50 basis points or 0.5% off of that estimate? What would it do to the plan? And as I mentioned, it would reduce the interest cost over that 22-year period by approximately $7.5 million, which would reduce the tax impacts during that repayment period. So because I know that that's only one of the variables, the property value is another variable, state aid's another variable, so there's a number of variables, I would prefer that you communicate a more conservative tax impact and then come in better. It should rates not change between now and the time you're able to finance. But I did want you guys to understand, what assumptions were baked into this $1.15 and 13 cents. And I think we covered the other assumptions there.
All right. Everybody's eyes glazed over yet?
No.
All right. Tom?
No, that's all exciting stuff.
All right.
I just have a question, I think, because I think it'll be a community question, and that is, this is a projection on the cost of what we're talking about with a new construction, renovations, and so forth. But additional costs are anticipated in terms of operations as well.
Right.
Tim, can you
These don't include, annual operating costs. There'll be some additional staffing. There'll be, of course, utilities and those types of things. And we'll develop that budget as we go through the process. So we will have that information as we go through the process.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
But just like with Rivercrest, those projections are not figured in the capital funding or financing.
Right. The funding and the impacts here are they're the debts, the principal and the interest on the debt, essentially.
Follow up, Tim, and that would be that, I think for clear and transparency, being clear and transparent, we'd want to have that information available to the community, I think, as well, just so they understand all the information regarding the implication of this decision.
Right, and that's what we had at Rivercrest as well. We went through that whole process,
Yep.
as you remember, and had those figures available for folks. So,
Mr. President?
Yes, Bruce.
Can we go back to the previous slide? I just want to ask a question, and again, for transparency's sake, and just to make sure that we're accurately representing. To me, when I look at this slide, it almost appears that it's a split, if you choose option 1 versus option 2, right? Question 1 versus question 1 and 2. You see where you kind of got that bar in the middle? I mean, it's really much closer to the high end there. It's really not a half a difference, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, that is a great point. That middle line, the one just where it says current debt payments, that wasn't intended to represent the lower box.
Okay.
You're right, it would be near the top, actually, if I were trying to do that.
Right.
What I was doing there was, throughout the years that we've been talking about various iterations, we had been talking about the drop from what your current debt payments are. So I was, indicating across all of the bars that if you, for instance, if you think of that 4.1 million you're currently committing towards referendum-approved debt payments as staying there, it's the amount above, that you're stepping up above that level that represents the $1.15 and the 13 cents combined.
Yep.
So we can modify the look of this chart if it is confusing, because
For me, I think it'd be good, we talk about this, we're in meetings and we're having a lot of discussions. For those that aren't as close to it, I just want to make sure that we're accurately representing it so that there isn't any opportunity for miscommunication. Thanks.
Mr. President,
Yes,
just to
Tom.
follow up to that, I think it's a good point, Bruce, but I think it is also important for the community to know that we're talking about a net increase to tax liability. I mean, what we're paying now and what we're proposing is a continuing at that level rather than dropping. And so there is a continuance of paying a certain level of tax and then adding to that, creating a net effect. And I think that's an important message as well. So just want to.
Any other questions? I guess what we're talking about here is projections, and you're trying to be conservative. I assume the same thing happened with Rivercrest and the impact there, and certain factors change and vary from the assumptions, and then you see either a greater or smaller impact on the taxes than maybe what was projected, correct?
Correct, and wherever I can, I try to start conservative and end better, because it makes you look better, which then ultimately makes me look better. But that happened in Rivercrest as well, that we had assumed higher than current market during the communication phase, and then rates, when you lock them in, were more favorable at that point.
Okay. So. Any other questions then? Final presentation then is, I guess we're past financing plan. You got anything on that?
That's it for the financing plan.
Okay. So finally, it will be the next slide, if I can get my computer here, is the proceeding with the referendum.
This slide that's up right now is just a slide regarding comparables for school construction referendums.
Tracy, you helped compile this, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Correct. So what you see here are some Wisconsin schools as well as some Minnesota schools that get close to the same price as what's being proposed for Hudson, and just those that passed as well as a couple that failed. And the one noted there, West Bend at 119.3 million, that one did fail. That would have been the highest referendum in the state. And then you'll also notice, just looking at the dates on those referendums, that most of those were older, but we did see a drop-off in schools going to construction during the recession and then starting to pick up again. Beloit coming in with one passed for 70 million more recently, and then Wayzata coming in at 112 million this past February. I think also just a bit to answer Carrie's question about the auditorium coming on later. If you look at Sun Prairie's referendum, they had two questions. The second question being for a pool. They did go back the following year for that pool, and that second year the construction or the referendum was higher than what was originally proposed. Yes, and it passed the second time, correct.
All right, anything more on questions from the board on comparing or this referendum, how it would compare with others? And by the way, those were actual amounts, those were not adjusted for inflation. Some of those referendums from 2007, like from New Richmond, 92.85, I don't know, I think we had that question in our work session, what that would translate to now based on increased construction costs. Do we have that number?
If memory serves me, Sam, and you can help me, I think we were at about 110 to 112 million if you projected Richmond's referendum out to today, in today's dollars. I think that's...
And of these examples, I also note that about half of them include actual new buildings, but most are just improving already existing.
Well, if you look at West Bend at 119, that was all for facility improvements. That was not a new building.
Right. So it's not uncommon anyway to have a combination of new construction and updating of other
Correct.
buildings in one bond.
Correct.
All right. Anything more on that?
113? 113. Okay, sorry. That, just to follow up, that New Richmond would be at 113.
If they
in
were doing
today's
it today.
dollars.
In today's dollars, all right. Okay, so now are we ready to go to number 6 then under A?
Yes.
All right.
I believe so.
And this has my name next to it, but I'm not going to be going through that. This is just proceeding with basically deciding, are we going to have, these resolutions do not get passed tonight, by the way. We're not taking action on those. Those would be voted on August 25th.
That's correct. Yep.
And
Yeah,
so
these are
what we're-
just to give you a flavor up front so you can see what they look like now. And I'll just go through them very quickly. So you'll be looking at 2 initial resolutions. So the first one is for the $99,965,000, and that's to cover the construction of the 10-12 and the renovations and improvements to the 8-9 and the land, et cetera, everything we went through before. And then the second initial resolution will be for the auditorium, okay, and that's $6,550,000. And then again, there are some official publications that we're required to do in there. I won't go into those. And then there is a final resolution which provides for a referendum election on the questions of the approval of the 2 initial resolutions. So adding those 2 initial resolutions together gives you the 106,515. And that those are the items that you'll take action on the 25th.
Okay.
And then there's also the form of the ballot. So if you go to that last page, you can voters can see what the ballot language is and the 2 questions there. So that's it.
Good. Any questions? Are we clear on that there'll be 2 questions and the amounts? All right. So what we've done is try to go through all of this before we take action on individual items, because it's obviously part of a full package and getting full background on everything. We'd like our consultants to, I guess, hold their seats though, because as we go through and have formal motions and there's discussion, if there's any specific questions, then you'll be able to address that. So going back to item A1, I guess we could entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. President?
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to move to advance the following secondary space long-term solutions to referendum. Question 1, construct a new 3-year high school for grades 10 through 12, convert, remodel, and renovate the current high school for grades 8 and 9 with space for district administration and support services, and convert the current middle school for grades 6 through 7. Question 2, construct an auditorium at the new high school.
Second.
All right, motion by Brian, second by Tom. Now it's open for discussion.
I'd just like to make an editorial comment, and that
Yeah,
is
Tom.
that I think that, this work tonight culminates to, I would guess, somewhere around 12 to 13 years of work, starting back in the early 2000s. The 2004 Community Committee that Brian Bell was part of, a lot of the work that's been put into this, of a successful referendum, last November, so forth. I think we're ready. And I think that I can say with clear conscience to the public that we have done due diligence coming to this plan. We've understanding that we balance a couple of items in making these decisions. One is the responsibility, the stewardship that we have with the taxpayers' dollars, which include all of us, and balanced with the quality of education that this district has seen over the term of our superintendent's time here. So it's balancing quality of education along with stewardship of dollars. I believe the plan has actually been endorsed by our community as we've engaged them. And the financing, the opportunities, everything that we have into this plan, I believe is the right thing. And I think it's important for our community. We're making an investment in our community. That's what we're doing. If we don't want to have the continued success, if we don't want to have the continued population growth in this community, don't pass this. That's my editorial comment tonight, so thanks. I realize I might be preaching to the choir here.
All right. Anyone else wish to comment then on the question before the board? Bruce, you look like you do.
Yeah, just real quick, I think if just to build on the communication that Tom discussed, the discussion for all of us was to have a full plan, right? To bring everything forward, not just one piece of this, but all the pieces. So bringing all those variables together, it certainly pushed everyone to get this done by November, because it's going to get the most individuals out during a time in which there'll be many voters out. So it's great to see that we're getting this brought forward at that time. And it's certainly going to be, an interesting turnout, because you're going to have those that are vehemently against this, and those are very positively for it. So it will be critical that everyone gets out to make sure that their voice is heard. And our job was to make sure that we were listening to the voice of the community, and also taking a look at all the variables and really exhausting all the opportunities and options that we had. So a lot of work went into this over actually since the first time that I stepped onto this board. So certainly appreciate everybody's efforts to put in the amount of time and effort that they have.
I just want to echo what Bruce just said and commend our administration on the hard work, extremely hard work that they've had putting this together, and actually commend prior boards and the citizens who've had the input on this. This is, as Tom pointed out, a multiple-year project that this community has always valued education. And the one exception that I recall in coming here in the nearly 25 years we've been in this community was the 8-9 referendum. And we saw that go down. And in retrospect, I don't know if there was any survey specific, in addition to the people that are just going to be against any building, there were folks who were in favor, instead wanted to see a new high school. And I heard that then again on the campaign trail. And I've heard people who say, I wanted a 4-year high school, not a 3-year. And all I have to say to that is I want to quote Voltaire, and I know there's been probably a lot of other philosophers who have stated this, but the quote is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And we could sit here as a board for the next 10 years and double the amount of time that we've done, another 12 years, trying to come up with the perfect solution, listening to every single person in this community. And you're going to have always a variety. I think that with all the work that's gone into this and the diligent effort to get community feedback, that I'm very convinced that this is the most fiscally responsible thing to do for this community in terms of our quality of education, the programming, and this community's commitment to that. Now I'll get off the soapbox and let anyone else who has comments on this. All right, hearing none, ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes. Next, we're on to land purchase agreement. I'll entertain a formal motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve the land purchase agreement for the property owned by John, Colleen, Mark, and Deborah Loughney at the northeast corner of County Road F and Red Brick Road as the site for a new high school, and advance the purchase to be included in and contingent upon the passage of the secondary space long-term solution referendum.
Second.
Motion by Tom, second by Brian. Any comments on this? This is answering the question of where, which this community has been talking about for over 2 years. And really, I guess going back to, again, 2002 when the previous boards purchased UU. Again, not having specific in mind as to what that secondary space solution, but we've already passed that motion. Now we know what we're going to do. The question is where we're going to do it. Carrie, did you have anything? No? All right.
Just one comment?
Yes.
I
Brian.
just want to just acknowledge the work, Tim and your team on working this. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and really appreciate everything you did there.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a team effort for sure. A lot of, yeah, as you said, a lot of moving parts. It takes a lot of people to get this put together. So thank you.
And I just want to comment, I think maybe the perception to the community is going to be, how did they do it? Because we saw the editorials in the paper saying that they're going to have to really, cook with some gas in order to get this done. But, this is, again, a multiple-year process. Lots and lots of parcels were looked at. And there will be people who will criticize the location or the amount you're paying. Again, I quote Voltaire, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." There was pros and cons to every single one of those parcels that this board looked at. Yeah. And this is our option A, in my book.
Yep.
Anyone else? Hearing no more comment, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. Now we get to the commitment of the general fund balance, and I'll entertain a formal motion. Give somebody else an opportunity. Anyone?
Mr. President,
Yes, Gary.
move to commit $1,600,000 of general fund balance for a total of $5 million for the secondary space long-term solution to lessen the impact to the taxpayer.
Second.
Motion by Carrie, second by Bruce. Again, open for comment or questions. And just to clarify that this addition would come over from anticipated excess. And Tim, you mentioned earlier some of the reasons why that occurred. Again, some conservative budgeting and very good results, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of, again, to move to that self-funded insurance.
Under promise and over deliver, right?
Yes.
Right.
All right. So with that, any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Now we move to the referendum budget, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve the secondary space long-term solution total project budget for question 1 of $104,965,828 with bond issuance of $99,965,000 and advance it to referendum. Additionally, approve a total project budget for question 2 for the auditorium with a total project budget and bond issuance of $6,550,000 and advance it to referendum.
Second.
All right. Motion by Lynn, second by Brian. Again, any comments or questions on the budget? This is for, I guess, public's purposes, something that this board has looked at for probably 3 or 4 months, refining it from general to more specific. This includes exhaustive looking at our programming in this district, the goals of the district, teacher input, administrator input, and then, of course, board input, obviously, for this budget. And again, these are projections, and I want to also reiterate that this is the language we have to have for the resolutions. It obviously doesn't necessarily represent the final cost because this project has to be bid out and so forth. And who knows, there could be savings, and maybe we've estimated conservatively again, but Any further questions or comments? And I guess my final comment would be this, I agree that this is a lot of money. I don't like the amount that it costs, but I do know for sure that if we waited another 2 to 5 to 10 years to build a new high school, that I would like the amount even less. And I think that based on the input that we've had, both with our experts up here, I mean, just look at what the added cost, if we would have had a referendum in the fall of 2012, you know, had we been able to build at the dog track, how much in financing that would have saved us there? How much in construction costs going back 2 years, over the last 2 years? Sam, do you have a?
From the construction cost standpoint, that was a little bit of a different estimate because we had the savings from the existing building as well, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was around 70 million, I thought, total. And that, I'm digging at the back of the memory of what that estimate was for the dog track project, but it was a significant amount of savings.
Okay.
I would just point out that that wasn't apples to apples, just
Right.
because Hoffman had not gone through the programming at all
Correct.
at that point. So if we remember earlier, amounts for this project were different than they are now because we didn't have the programming done.
Correct.
But, okay, and projecting out to the future, if we waited another 2 years, for example, what impact? We've heard the financing impact it does just on a half point, or half a percentage point. What would be the estimated construction cost?
The construction impact, if you go back a number of different years, even into the early 90s, there's never been a decrease. Some years have been nominal, maybe around 1%, but some years have been up to close to 8% of an increase on a yearly basis, depending on that year. So it would definitely be an impact. And right now, with what we're seeing with the market conditions, construction is starting to get pricier. Actually, by the month, we've seen a big jump this year, just from last year alone. So we're expecting that this year we're going to see upwards of 5, 6, 7% again this year, and potentially next year if the industry continues to keep booming, the prices will reflect that.
And this whole budget also reflects something I don't think was evident on the screen before, but this is an average. You had a range of 210 to 250 per square foot, correct?
That's correct, 210 to 250. Some of the other projects that you saw up there were around 236. New Richmond, I believe, was around 236 as normalized to today's dollars at that amount, or for that school, I should say. So 230 is the average right now that we're using.
All right. So we're just, again, trying to not be hedging on one extreme or the other, trying to take the middle cost. But we've seen that go up just in the last couple of years, that figure of per square foot. All right.
Mr. President, just in support of your point as well, I think it's a safe statement after the report we've gotten tonight from David that this problem's not going to go away. I mean, this isn't something that possibly we could have self-fulfilling prophecy, I suppose. If we don't do anything, people might start leaving in mass exodus, the community. But my assumption is that we're still going to have growth in this community. The issue of space need is still going to be with us. So, supporting your point regarding the costs are going to go up if we didn't do anything at the risk of, or the hope that somehow we're just going to magically stay the same in population. I think that's a pipe dream.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, call the question then. All those in favor of this referendum budget, referendum project budget and total, and how it breaks down on the two questions, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passes. Now we'll go to the financing plan.
Mr. President, move to approve the secondary space long-term solution financing plan as presented.
Second.
Motion by Brian, second by Lynn. Again, any questions regarding the finance plan or any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. And now we have the final motion. Anyone want to do the honors?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move to direct the administration to proceed with preparation for inclusion of the secondary space long-term solution referendum with 2 separate questions on the November 4, 2014 general election.
Second? Anyone?
Second.
Second by Lynn, motion by Tom. Further questions or comments on this?
And my only comment is that we worked hard to make sure it was on an election where there was high voter turnout. It was really important to us.
Mm-hmm.
We heard a lot from the community, so.
All right, with that, any other comments? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? The motion passes.
Thanks for all the work.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
job.
Next item for action, topic for action, commitment of $300,000 of general fund balance for self-funded health dental insurance.
Okay.
Tim?
This is the same document that you saw before, only we did the commitment of secondary space. Again, the same information. Incidentally, this was reviewed at the Finance Committee, and they did endorse this. Looking at the self-funded, again, our first year in the self-funded, the board did commit $1.65 million when we started out. And the reason that we want to do that, and the reason that we want to put in an additional $300,000 is to help us being self-funded. We now pay for the claims on the uninsureds. So adding to that $300,000 is more of a rate stability type of goal, so we don't have rates spiking up and down. So again, looking at that too. The unassigned estimated percentage of expenditures for the unassigned fund balance would be at about 28%, which is right in that middle of the 25 to 30% of the board policy. So, any questions?
You don't have any document you could take us through line by line or anything like that? No? Okay.
Not unless you want to. Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion then.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, the motion is to commit $300,000 of general fund balance for self-funded health dental insurance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to the consent items on the agenda, and
Mr. President,
yes.
I move approval of the consent items and that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $2,667,032.85.
Second.
It's been a motion and a second. Is there any questions regarding, anyone need the rationale or the breakdown of that?
Not on consent.
Hearing none, then we've got, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, the motion passes. On to committee reports. Lynn, would you report on finance, please?
Mr. President, I'll be brief. The Finance Committee met on Monday, August 4th. We've covered all of the items on our agenda for that meeting. Other than that, I'll report that we did have a closed session for deliberating and negotiating the purchase of public property, and we also discussed the progress that we are making as far as adding a second school resource officer. We still have some work to do, but we feel like we have some direction from the city on how they're feeling about that and the cost sharing that they would like to see. So we'll continue to work on that and report later. And that ends my report.
All right, any questions on finance? Hearing none, move on to learning and program development. Brian?
Thank you. First topic was we had to do the annual restraint and seclusion report that Tony did a great job presenting. Just know that these are emergency interventions, that there's a clear risk to the child or other people that the child's in contact with. They're very rare, like 1% of all incidents involve this, but Tony reviewed that with us. So, and then we deleted you already approved in the consent items. And then just spend maybe a minute on this. Computer science, software development strategy, I asked Mary and Sandy to kind of review our computer science offering. Just interesting, according to code.org, which is a pretty well thought of organization led by people like Bill Gates and others. Computer science gets less than 1% of educational funding around the US right now, but generates 60% of STEM jobs. 60% of STEM jobs go in computer science and mathematics. That's the challenge for us. I think we're moving in the right direction we added a computer science course by Project Lead the Way coming up next school year. We have robotics programs in the elementary school. We have the STEM Academy. So we're doing the right stuff, but I think we still have a big opportunity to do even much better. Our current software development course is outdated. It's Visual Basic. We really need to kind of revamp our curriculum. So I've asked Sandy to come back to Learning Program Development meeting in October with some suggestions. And there's a lot of information out there. We have a new computer science teacher that should be helpful in that. So there's opportunity in front of us. We've done some unbelievable amount of work. I think it springboards us to even do more. So that's all I have on that.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that strong, emotional committee report.
60% of STEM jobs, 60%. 60. 1% of educational funding.
That's awesome. Well, what your report only did was confirm for me I made the right decision making you chair of that committee, so thank you. Personnel Committee, that would be Tom Hound.
Personnel Committee met August 5th, and Andrea helped us understand the staffing update for 2014-15.
Your mic is not on.
It's not on. Booming voice wasn't enough, huh? So, starting over August 5th, this Personnel Committee met. Andrea helped us understand the 2014-15 staffing update, so we're in the throes of being fully staffed for 2014. It doesn't come with any small task in that we've got some specialized teachers such as Chinese teachers to fill. And we've had a good one, and we have creatively retained her with a little bit of creative thought and maneuvering, and appreciate the work that she's done along with the HR team to do that. There are many one-year contract hires that'll be continuing. There are some new positions that are coming on board. One that Brian will be happy to hear about, and that's the computer science, a new ITS supervisor, middle school science teacher, and EBD hires. So excited about that, excited about the opportunities for additional programming, and Andrea and staff have done a great job. In addition to that, we've also looked at revision of board policy 4503, leave with loss of pay. These revisions, and there's a number of them, there's a revision to leaves of absence language in the Certified Employee Handbook, and with added language around the Family and Medical Leaves Act, as well as the same revision regarding leaves of absence language in the Support Employee Handbook, and added language regarding the FMLA. So much of that revision, I don't want to go into detail, but much of that revision is to strengthen, clarify, make sure that we have clear understanding about policies that relate to our regulations as well as state laws and so forth. So all of that was taken care of, and our last agenda item was an update on adding a second school resource officer, of which we're working with the city on regarding that share cost between that. So it's still in work, and I'm hopeful for a fair and reasonable outcome to that.
And on those policy revisions, which, not that I want to spend a lot of time on this, but I did note that, there's an effort to try and be consistent, but at the same time did not remove the discretion that's required in reviewing those requests, correct?
Correct, yes.
All right.
Just one comment?
Yeah.
So the computer science teacher, that's exciting, and also, I hope that he and the team can promote computer science to females and to other student populations, because the tech is in desperate need of more diversity in computer science.
Excellent point. All right. Any more comments and further discussion on the Personnel Committee? All right, hearing none, I'll be brief on the Facilities and Grounds Committee meeting. We started our meeting off with a closed session in which we were discussing one of the items that we actually passed, which was the land purchase. So that was done. We had, let's see, the budget, I guess, on the referendum, which we already passed. There was updates on that. And then finally, we had the update from Jim Stasko on all the summer projects, which is phenomenal. Over 100 projects that those guys do, and on a small staff. I mean, and understanding some of that stuff is subbed out, but it's incredible the amount of work that's done to get the facilities ready for the new school year. And I want to commend Jim and his crew and what they're doing and keeping us on schedule and on budget. So, any questions on the Facilities and Grounds then? All right. With that, we've completed our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It passes.